Ready to go? Camera guys, we on? All right, so good morning and welcome panel, and to anyone who's watching on the live stream. At this stage of the hearing of submissions on the draft FDS, we're in our deliberations phase. So just to the panel, the documents that I've got open on my screen, which you may need to have available as well, the officer's reply that we received yesterday, the deliberations sheet that Anna has prepared, that big multi-page document, and there was a document that was circulated on the 28th of March, which was the answers of the officers to the questions that I posed in writing. So that's the third document, and then obviously the draft FDS itself, which we may want to refer to.
Thanks, Rob, and if we've got everything lined up, I'll do a cut of hearing. Get us going.
Exactly, thank you.
Then we'll all feel safe as we go through the day.
Great, thank you.
We might even get through our deliberations in a better time than expected.
Thanks, Heine.
Whakatakata hau ki te ura, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, ki mā kina ki uta, ki mā taratara ki tā, e aki ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he au hei te hei mauriora.
As we discussed yesterday, there's a number of sort of key or high-level issues that I think we should helpfully, usefully discuss first. And those were greenfield residential land requests, greenfield business land requests, obviously the Mosgiel Freight Hub, residential intensification area 11, and also now area 6, because that's come out of the staff's recommendations to us. The Strathallan Estate block of land, and then the issues that we discussed with Karunanga towards the end of their presentation regarding infrastructure on the peninsula and on the northern coast. So if the panel's still happy with that approach, we'll just proceed through those issues, and then we'll turn the pages. I think on the end of hearing report, there's some decisions that we need to make arising out of that report, and then we'll turn the pages on Anna's big, huge multi-page document. So, are you going to drive now, or?
Are you alright, I think it makes sense if she's fit Brandy side of it, it takes quite a while for her to log in. Yeah,
okay.
We're almost there to the login. Yes.
All right, now if the panel don't mind, in terms of those high-level issues, I might kind of reverse the order that we've been doing in terms of the submitters, and I might just say a few words on each first, and then we'll just go around the rest of the panel, if that's okay. So with the greenfield residential areas, as you know, we had multiple requests from submitters, predominantly represented by Emma Peters, for additional greenfield areas. And we've received legal submissions from Michael Garbett and also Phil Page. In my mind, the starting point for our consideration of that is clause 3.14.1a of the NPSUD, which says that the FDS must be informed by the most recent and applicable housing and business development capacity assessment. Now, Dunedin City's done that in two blocks. You've got a separate housing capacity assessment and then a business capacity assessment. The bottom line for me is that the October 23 update to the housing capacity assessment shows that there is no deficit. There's actually a surplus of housing capacity. The capacity in that report is all district plan enabled, infrastructure enabled, feasible and reasonably expected to be realised, and so there's simply no need for additional greenfield areas at this stage. So my view is that we would decline to introduce any new greenfield residential areas into the FDS. So that's how I'm seeing it. So maybe if we whip around the table, Andrew.
Yeah, I suppose to add to that, we didn't receive any compelling evidence to form a contrary view other than the way you've framed it up. So.
Yes, that's correct, and I should have added that we didn't receive any economic evidence, and apart from Council's own assessments, the only economic evidence we have is from Rodney Yeoman, and he was fully supportive of the approach Council had taken. So.
Now, when I say contrary view, I'm talking about the overall assessment data, evidence.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. None of the submitters gave us any evidence that, you know, said that their housing assessment, that proved that our housing assessment was wrong. And then I guess the next test in my head was, and Michael Garbutt talked about it yesterday, was in terms about the infrastructure development and how in time frames, how close was that going to be to we have to include that in our thinking as well. And any of those greenfield sites, they're not even on the list of planning, I think, or they're so far down as we can't reasonably include them at this time.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing that is shorter is the papakaika. Yeah, I appreciate that, but it is in some ways we should be prioritising. Yeah.
I think that's a clear position of the panel. So what I'll do, obviously, I'm going to prepare a decision report, and I'll prepare that, and I may get the staff to assist me with some elements of that, and then obviously every panel member will have the job of reviewing the report that I draft on our behalf, and you can make edits to the wording and wordsmithing and we'll discuss how we might go about that towards the end of the day. All right, so the next one on my list was greenfield business areas. And I'm focusing, in my mind, particularly on entirely new greenfield areas because the FDS already signals with those little elliptical circles in figure 29 that there are proposed future business land areas already flagged within the FDS. So my thought was, well, do we need to do anything over and above that? My view again is that we don't, primarily because the business development capacity assessment for Dunedin City only identified a short-term deficit, and that was only for about 54,000 square metres of floor space, which is about 5 hectares. And the new greenfield industrial areas that were sought out at Duke's Road, the evidence from Emma Peters, who was advocating in support of those, was that they were really medium, if not long-term propositions, so they wouldn't address the capacity shortfall that's been identified by the council anyway. And then turning to the Anside properties and Burnside Dunedin Limited areas, they're already in the FDS, and so I think what we might do in relation to them is maybe just enlarge the little elliptical circle that relates to the Anside properties and Burnside Dunedin Limited properties to include the additional areas that they sought. So that would be an amendment to figure 29 to make that little ellipse a bit bigger. But other than that, I don't think we need to do anything else in that regard because they're already in there. So go around the other way, Kate.
I'm very comfortable with that.
I agree with that.
All right, now we come to the Mosgiel Freight Hub, and Jim.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to recuse myself from this particular discussion for two reasons. One is that as a city councillor and member of the RTC, I carry knowledge which has not been presented in this environment for evidence, and I find myself at a point where I'm in difficulty to be able to properly contribute, knowing what I know, and I'm also deeply concerned about activities that occurred prior to this arriving here at the committee, and I'm going to want to pursue that. And as a consequence, I'm basically saying that I feel that I have a responsibility to the oath that I took as a city councillor, and that sits higher on the priority order than the commissioner. But if I stayed on, I would be undermining the activities of this committee, so I'm going to step off for this item.
Well, look, thanks, Jim. Thanks very much for bringing that to our attention, and also I think the position you've arrived at is very principled and also appropriate, so I thank you for that.
I'll actually leave the room and come back.
You're welcome to sit and listen because you've recused yourself, so it is a public meeting, so you're welcome to listen to the debate. All right, so thanks for that. But in relation to that, I think in the decision report, the Mosgiel Freight Hub will have its own section. It'll be essentially ring-fenced in our report, so it can be considered as a discrete item under any other council process that occurs after this. But in terms of our duties, in terms of the FDS, it will be in there. So now we need to discuss it. And I think the starting point is that the staff and Mr Garbett seem to be indicating that it was appropriate to include a reference to the freight hub as sought by the submitters, albeit at an indicative level with a clear enunciation of the constraints that apply to that site. That's kind of my potter's summary of where I think the staff and our legal advisors got to. So let's go around the table on that. Andrew.
I suppose this whole process is, the FDS doesn't achieve certainty, but it creates the ability to further investigate whoever that might be, whether it's the City Council, whether it's Kiwi Rail, whether it's Pete Dines and associated parties, Port Otago or whatever. So I'm comfortable that what we've received via the staff report, which is a indicative line on the map that encompasses the submitters' suggested block plus an extended area. So, like I'm saying, is because we recognise there is a need for a freight hub. We recognise that over time it'll happen regardless of what we do in an ad hoc manner. I think there's an opportunity here to have a more of a coordinated approach and probably a more sustainable, resilient outcome actually in the longer term. So, yeah.
I guess overnight I've wrestled with this in my mind is if the submitters didn't already own land, would we have been considering this as a freight hub anyway, just as in general? And I think there has been talk in the city about the need for a freight hub, and if there ever was going to be a freight hub within Dunedin City, that's the logical place. So, I mean, kind of that's where I've come to it in my own mind, is that regardless of having the submitters, the city has thought that this is something that needs to probably be addressed, and listening to what Michael Garbett had to say in general in terms of the FDS, is that by us by indicating with an ellipse or whatever it is on the plan, it doesn't mean that is going to end up in in the district plan or anything like that. It's just an indication, and then it's up to commercial interest to determine whether it's going to work or not. So that's where I've got to in my mind, and I do think that by indicating that I feel comfortable with that.
Thank you for that, Arnie.
Considering what was put in front of us on the PowerPoint from one of the submitters, I think we need to clearly define what the activities are, because it'll be receiving, warehousing and dispatching freight is quite straightforward. They're talking about maintaining containers on site, but there was worker accommodation, which often we tend to be in conflict when we're looking at commercial, industrial or any other kind of designation over the land. So I think we just need to be cognizant that there is potentially aspirations for residential on that land, because if they're permanent workers living there, it's residential as opposed to any other kind of accommodation. But otherwise agree.
No, that's thank you, Arnie. It's a useful clarification. Kate?
I'm supportive of it being a transport hub, but it has to be tied to being a part of the railway line and its attachment to that, and how that is articulated and which section it goes in. I'm still haven't quite clear my head where we're going to put it in, but the need for it is articulated in the regional land transport plan draft anyway. Somewhere south of Dunedin. Where that is, this is just an opportunity. It's not necessarily definitely there. There's a lot of things that have to be aligned to do that. I don't feel as conflicted, and I'm not quite sure, as being on the regional land transport plan as my colleague, and he must know other things. So I'm comfortable. I think we need to be very clear about why that particular site. And when you look at that site, there are a whole lot of other parts that have already been put in there, including a loop rail and things like that are quite specific to that site, and how we articulate that, and the constraints on it, as you've said, about what other activities. Because once you do this, the drive for nearby landowners to do industrial will be there. So we have to be really careful, and it almost needs a structured plan of what will have to happen first in order to be able to use it.
Look, based on my position is based on the evidence that's been presented to us, and obviously I don't live in Dunedin, so I came into this totally fresh. I think there's a convincing case for us to include it in the FDS as an indicative location for a possible future freight hub. And I agree with you, Hoani, that it needs to be carefully worded as such. And I hadn't picked up or I'd forgotten that there may be a potential for workers' accommodation or residential, and that definitely needs to be excluded. It's a working freight hub, warehousing and dispatching in terms of how it would go into the FDS. In terms of where it might go, Kate, Anna, would it be in section 6.6.1? Would that where we would put it, or do you have a view on where it should go in the FDS?
I draw your attention to the advice and the reporting officer's spreadsheet, where they would have considered the most appropriate place to put it. I note as well that they also have a sort of a related matter, which is, generally recommending if there's additional business or housing capacity added, that the infrastructure that goes with it is also added. So I think that's in there somewhere as well, but I would just recommend that you consider what the officers have.
Okay, so
said
when we
on
turn
that.
the pages on either the office end of hearing report or your big huge table, then that'll become clear where it's to go. Okay.
There's several places that could go, and that's,
Yeah. So let's park that as an issue, and once we've gone through the detail of the end of hearing report and Anna's great big working, what are we going to call that thing, the working spreadsheet? It may become clear where it goes, and if not, we'll revisit that point. All right, so I think that's where the panel's landed, so thank you all very much for that. The next item on my list was residential intensification areas, initially Area 11, but now Area 6, which has been recommended to be omitted. The staff recommend omitting both Areas 6 and 11 for the reasons that they outlined. So let's go around the panel on that one, Kate.
Yeah, and especially the questions that were asked about capacity.
Yeah, I'm also happy with the removal of those areas. Obviously that has some consequential amendments, which I'll set out the need for those in our decision report, but the remaining areas need to be renumbered, figures need to be amended, and any narrative in the FDS that refers to numbered areas, that needs to be all amended so it lines up, so we don't have a gap, so it doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. We need to, you know what I mean? We need to adjust all the numbering and the maps that go with it. But other than that, that's good.
On that basis, are we actually better to give them a name rather than a number, because then it's much more specific, and then it...
Yes.
Yeah,
and I notice certainly in some of the reports, and I can't remember which one it was, they do have names. The names are in brackets, aren't they, after the area number? So, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Particularly for lay people who are reading it, they'll think Area 5, where's that?
appreciating that the areas, showing them on the maps are really hard when they're small numbers, and so that giving them at least an idea about names, areas, I think really assists the readability.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. Right, the next one, Strathallan Estate, and we received submissions, is it the Buller Street properties, is that what they're called? And we received evidence from them, and we also had a response from the officers, particularly transportation, raising some issues with the road that's adjacent to that site and conflict with heavy vehicles, etc. So I think the recommendation of the officers was primarily for those reasons, not to make the change that was sought, which was to indicate it as a, just check what they asked for. Oops. Yeah, that's what they wanted, thanks. Yeah, commercial and mixed use zone is what they asked for. All right, let's go around the table. Can't remember where I started last time, but Andrew, what's your thoughts on that?
Trying to use my memory, bringing it up. This particular area, I mean, obviously there has been some other, the proposed activities have developed over the time in an ad hoc way, but to me the application didn't sort of set itself apart in any way, shape or form that would immediately help you to jump to a conclusion that this one needs to fit in with that type of activity. I think it's that particular block is probably best left zoned industrial.
I think between the transport comment about the busyness of Strathallan Street, plus also the planner's comment about, you know, industrial land is the area that we need the most, and I just think we're better to keep it as an industrial. And also, as you said, I mean, the submission wasn't overwhelmingly, didn't, you know, kind of say, oh, absolutely, it should be. That's how I felt anyway.
Out of preference for it stays industrial.
Yeah, I think the activity on Strathallan Street is very important. But the appellants also asked, and I'm aware of this by having been involved with manufacturing in the area, with a retail component to it, is that the 10% rule is actually quite confining if you've got the wrong layout on your building. And I know it's outside our remit because we're just doing strategic planning, but I think it's something that could be noted as something that might be considered in the future when industrial land has been looked at and the rules around retail and that land is used.
Thanks, Jim. And just, Kate, before I turn to you, thanks for raising that point about that 10% restriction, because I can't remember which of you suggested it, but one of you, and it was a good idea, I think, suggested that in our decision report we might have a section that doesn't relate directly to changes to the FDS, but has a bullet point list of matters that we feel the council could usefully consider going forward as part of other processes. So I think, Jim, that's one we would add to that. I think it was you, Kate, suggested that, did you? Well, someone did anyway. Oh, was Anna suggested. So Anna, can you keep a running, have you got some pen and paper, and just keep a list of the things we think could go into that section? And the first one is the 10% restriction on retail in the industrial zone. Is that, where's that affect, Jim? Yep. Right, sorry, Kate.
I'm really comfortable. I think it's really good to reflect on the comments on the freight hub, because in many ways this is a freight hub area at the moment, and the potential conflicts you're going to get. So, I want to be really clear that while this is very heavily used as freight, and that may change in the future, we need to really ensure that the industrial the commercial mixed use will have reverse sensitivities which will be inappropriate in that area. Yeah.
All right, so when I
sorry, I just need to articulate that I wasn't here for the evidence, but I did sit and read it and listen to it online.
Thank you very much for that. So when I looked at this submission, and I initially thought, oh, that sounds like a reasonable idea, but then I've now come to a different conclusion, primarily based on the evidence received on two matters. Well, evidence received on one matter, the transportation issues that were outlined to us, and secondly, then when I reflected some more, I thought, well, hang on a minute, the only area where the business capacity assessment has identified a shortfall is industrial land, so it doesn't really make sense to indicate that existing industrial land should be changed, given that that's the only capacity deficit that's been identified in the city studies to date. So I mean, I agree with the rest of you that unfortunately I don't think we can agree to that submission. All right. So the next big picture issue that I think we could usefully discuss before we dive into the detail relates to the matters raised by the Runanga yesterday, or the Runaka as it is down here. And in my mind, and I think it was particularly focused by some of the questions I put regarding timing of infrastructure, and also, Jim, the questions you put to the iwi representatives, in my mind, there's a whole raft of changes to the narrative that iwi have sought and that the staff have generally recommended that should be done. And yesterday the Runaka said they were totally happy with the staff's recommendations on the narrative, even when the staff had amended the wording that the Runaka had initially sought. So there's a whole bunch of detail that this piece seems to have broken out on in terms of that. But the area where there was still some residual desire from the Runaka to make amendments related to the infrastructure timing, and in my mind I put it in two buckets, Otago Peninsula and then North Coast. I'm not sure if North Coast is the correct description. And we talked about that yesterday, so maybe if we deal with them separately, Otago Peninsula first, and there's two issues there. There's table 18.3 of the FDS, which relates to potable water and wastewater infrastructure, and then table 19 of the FDS, which relates to transport issues. And so maybe if I just summarise where I think we got to with the Runaka in terms of posing questions to them.
Probably just before that, I'm a private landowner. Kia ora, Chair. Just prior to giving consideration to this, I'm a private landowner and a Māori landowner in the area that we're about to discuss, and looking for some direction from yourself whether I should sit back from the table.
My general approach on conflict hoani is if it smells bad, it is bad. So if you think it doesn't pass what I call the sniff test, then it's probably safer, as Jim did earlier on an issue, just to recuse yourself from this particular discussion on Otago Peninsula. I don't think that would be the case for the North Coast, would it? Or would it?
No, it wouldn't be.
So on this particular issue, we'll note that you've recused yourself from this little bit of discussion. So table 18.3, and what I put to the Runaka was, if we look at that in terms of potable water, the servicing assessment for Harrington Point would change to 1 to 3 years, the options analysis would go 1 to 3 years, and the reticular provision would go to 1 to 10. So that's where we ended up on that one. And then with wastewater, servicing assessment for Harrington Point would go to 1 to 3, options analysis 1 to 3, and the provision would go to 1 to 10, so very similar. So maybe if we go around the table on those potential changes and see what the panel thinks. Kate?
I'm really comfortable with it. There's a chicken and egg situation here, and I just want to make sure that we've got that in our heads about if you do this for this land, what it may open up into other development land, and being really aware of that. And I presume that will come out in those reports, and so we don't have to deal with it in the. It's just whether there needs to be some other wording in there that would flow from that, and just getting that clear in my mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And when I thought about that, the Runaka haven't asked for any additional greenfield residential areas. They haven't talked about rezoning areas. So there's no, in my mind, housing capacity issues that we need to think about here, because it hasn't been put on the table. They're simply wanting an acceleration of some infrastructure. And then whatever will flow from that will flow from that.
Yep. And look, yeah, and well, I'll go to the point of saying that I'm very, very comfortable with it, and actually I think it's a requirement, having read what I've read into the policies of the future development strategy, that we have to look at that and making it happen.
Yeah, we need to put into effect our relationship with Mana Whenua, to be honest. Ebert Allison did pick up on that point, that any increase in services and connectivity will have an impact on the area. But that's already been raised by Mana Whenua, and they're well aware of it, so, yeah.
Cherry?
My only comment, my question, which I thought was what Kate was heading to, was does this have an impact on other planning infrastructure? But I think I'm comfortable with this because mainly we're changing the timing of the assessments and the options analysis, and it's still, by the actual provision, is still like 1 to 10. I don't think it's necessarily going to affect the timing, which then might affect the upgrades in other areas, which affects that development, if you see what I mean, the kind of domino effect. But I think this won't have that much of an impact, because the actual work still can be scheduled. You're questioning at me. If we, by speeding up the work here, does that have an impact on the overall infrastructure upgrades in the city? I don't think it does.
Sorry, the reason I would probably had a puzzled look is I understood something different from what Councillor Wilson was saying, and I thought what you were saying is, if you service this area, will it have an impact on the existing zoning or the existing levels of development along that corridor? So that's what I thought you were asking, and then I think you're asking something different. So that's why I was trying to reconcile the two things in my mind. So I think that the financial impact is something that gets addressed at the LTP stage. So when all the 1 to 10s that are directed in the FDS are considered holistically, then the deliverability and or prioritization amongst them, if they can't all be delivered, or even what order they might be potentially delivered, is an LTP matter.
I agree. The fact that it's primarily the assessments that we're moving forward, which will then, the work won't say it's going to take 5 years to do the work, so we've got to work out the priorities and the time and that, because I'm happy with those.
Yeah, well, I pick up on what Jim said. I mean, this is part of this process is to recognise our treaty commitments, and yeah, it's also a step along the way to the journey that we all have in terms of building that stronger relationship with Kotahu Mana Whenua. So, yep, agreed.
Yeah, and I agree with you all as well, and particularly I was comforted by the question I put to Michael Garbett, which said, if we change these delivery timeframes for assessments or actual provision, does that impose a mandatory obligation on the council? And he said, well, no, that would just be had regard to or taken into account or be used to inform the LTP processes, and they will run their own course. So I think we're just giving really a signpost, but then obviously everything's subject to funding decisions down the track. So I'm happy to go with the rest of the panel on that. So then in terms of Otago Peninsula, the other issue that I'd noted down, and I may not have captured everything, was just an amendment to Table 19. And the row was Road Safety Improvement Peninsula Connection Road Safety Project, and I'd noted Runaga had sought or would like to see the 10 to 30 changed to 1 to 10. So let's go around the table on that, and if you think I've missed anything for the Otago Peninsula in terms of infrastructure timing that was discussed yesterday, then sing out as well. But Andrew.
Yeah, no, happy with that request. I think, and once again, too much knowledge can be dangerous, but when that project started, I think there was 9 or 10 stages, and clearly the far end stage, the Harrington Point stage, seems to have dropped off the radar, and it needs to be obviously reinstated and a commitment, I suppose, at the strategic level is the first step. So.
Yeah, I agree with the changing of the timing. I wouldn't say it dropped off the radar. I'd say basically escalating costs eventually meant the last section didn't get done. And I agree with Mr. Allison's statement that if we'd done it in the reverse order, it's very unlikely we wouldn't have done the Vauxhall stage. So, and I think with the 1 to 10, that puts it in the right time frame for it to potentially break it into sections and do each section as needed if we are doing it entirely on council funds. And we need to be working with Mana Whenua on making sure the government comes back to this one.
I'm very happy with 1 to 10. I'm probably slightly concerned about the more of the description. And often we look at a project and it gets bad press because it's seen as a cycleway or a walkway, and fails to recognise the increased climate resilience that's required, which is very much a key part of this job, of this project. We have a key tourism asset out on the Taiaroa Head which has huge economic benefits to the city and is part of our wildlife capital. And at the moment, that road is not resilient. And it does a whole lot of other things for development of that land as well. It should, but I think we're focusing in some ways on the wrong aspects of it. So I think it's absolutely vital that we have increased climate resilience to the tip. So yes, the other part of that is the difficulty of developing Maori land needs to have all of these things in alignment and those projects coming onto line together to get the best outcomes. It's really, really hard because of the nature of Maori land to get development. We need to make some of these other things, if we're going to honour the right to develop it, slightly easier.
All right, no, I agree with the view of the panel on that matter. Now, is there anything that we've missed out in terms of infrastructure for the Otago Peninsula that the Runaka brought to our attention? Has anyone noted anything else down?
Did you notice something?
Well, I think we're putting a lot on iwi, but there were other submissions suggesting these things, and we need to acknowledge them as well. It's not just focused. Yeah.
Yeah. At the moment, we're just discussing the Runaka, but obviously in the detail that we'll get into soon, there's a whole lot of other submitters that we have regard to. Yeah.
Just to clarify, in my notes I took down that you mentioned potable water, but there's also the waste. Do your comments?
We've
On
done
table, on table 18.3, they covered both.
Yeah, we've discussed
Yep,
wastewater
okay.
already. Yep, keep up.
Yep, sorry.
Those numbers again.
No,
No, she doesn't need them because she's only there to answer our questions. So, yeah. All right. So, okay. No, if there's nothing else missing, then we'll move to North Coast. So, Hoani, you come back in at this stage. And again, it's a very similar matter. So the tables, infrastructural tables that I'd noted down we need to think about was only 23.3, which is on page 137 of the draft FDS. And if we look at potable water first, and very similar to as previous, investigate options for alternative source for the Waikoiti, how do you say that, Hoani? Waikoiti, and the Karatani water supply.
You're good.
1 to 3, servicing assessment for Brins Point comes to 1 to 3, options analysis for servicing Brins Point comes 1 to 3, and then provision of reticulated potable water supply goes 110. And should we do that one first? Okay.
Very happy with that.
Jim?
I had in my notes also the capacity constraints and water supply to Warrington. Are we doing that? Are we doing the whole table now, or just that section of the table?
We can do the whole table now. I'll just find it.
So you're talking about the section above?
Well, that's what I'm just wondering if we're doing just one section or the whole table.
No, we can, if we're on that table now, we can look at it. So, yep, which bit was it?
Line 4, which is 10 to 30, which is address capacity constraints and water supply to Warrington, Waitara and Seacliff. I had in my notes 1 to 10.
Yes, yes, good point.
Yep, and then the next line below was 1 to 10, the next line below that was 1 to 3, next line below that was 1 to 3, and the next one below that was 1 to 10.
Okay, so just run that past, so hang on a minute.
That's the whole next paragraph.
Yeah, so table line. So starting at line 4, just run that by me again. So 10 to 30 goes to...
1 to 10.
Yep.
And then the next line down, 10 to 30 goes to 1 to 10.
Yeah.
1 to 10 goes to 1 to 3 in the next line.
Yeah.
On the next line, 1 to 10 goes to 1 to 3, which is what you've just
Yeah.
discovered. And then the next line, 10 to 30 goes 1 to 10.
Yeah, excellent.
And then there was an addition of an additional line. Yeah.
Yeah, on the wastewater, an
Yep.
additional line. All right, so potable water, so we're all happy with that. So, Tim, you're happy with that, with those changes?
Yep.
Jerry?
Yep.
Andrew? Yep. So now looking at wastewater then. So what I had noted down, and I may have some gaps, just jumping between documents, was provision of reticulated wastewater servicing Puki, Te Raki, Brins Point and
Tati.
Waiti would go 110, and then a new line which would have words something like assessment of the preferred overall option for the replacement of the Waikoaiti and Warrington wastewater treatment plants 1 to 3.
I'd just, instead of naming those two plants, just say North Coast.
Okay, of the North Coast wastewater
Area.
treatment plants.
Because clearly Seacliff is included in, certainly from
Yep.
Manawhenua's perspective.
Yep.
Well, and the big picture question is going to be, what are we going to reticulate and how many plants are we going to have? Oh, Mike.
Sorry, Andrew, you want to click your mic on? Yeah.
It only refers to upgrading at Seacliff, so it's just making that point. They were looking for more than that.
So they were the 2 line entries that I'd noted down. Were there any others?
I just had a note, and it's probably a note, to go in as something to be considered by the council. Was I had master plan question mark, like for all of the, whether it's not just for the North Coast, but for all of the city. We don't have that master plan. But well, I mean, I know it was when we were talking about wastewater plants, but I think you brought that up. I'm looking at you, Jim. Something about.
Well, I know that there's an activity called integrated systems planning, but I have not been involved with it, so I don't know what it is, but I assume that's what that is. But also, the other discussion that you and I had outside this room, so I can bring it in now, is whether or not we need to flag that in somewhere in the 30 to 50 year mark, we may be looking to need to get other sources of water. But I think that can sit outside this cycle of the FDS, potentially.
I wonder whether it's just a bullet point on those extra, things that we've identified that needs to be. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where I'd capture it.
Yep, so we add Anna to the list, to your bullet point list of items that we're going to bring to the council's attention to address outside of the FDS is, what are the words, Jim?
I'd say water, drinkable water sources for drinking water in the next 30 to 40 years.
Okay.
Is that also where the master plan would go, or does the master plan have to be? It seems to me that we can't put the master plan into this document. You're better to have that as a bullet point as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so a district-wide master plan can go on that bullet point, but in terms of this table, I think we have the words that Jim said, assessment of the preferred overall option for the replacement of the North Coast wastewater treatment plants, and that's a 1 to 3.
Good.
So are people happy with those 2 amendments? Was there anything else?
On the end of those amendments, if we're making a generic kind of North Coast statement rather than talking about the site, do we need to talk to the Manawhenua sensitivities of those areas and ensuring that wahitapu, wahitupuna avoided through those relocations?
Yeah, that would be part of the assessment, I imagine. That was a pretty fundamental part of any kind of assessment. So, yeah. I don't think we need to say that in this table. But
No, that's fine, just checking. I presume next stage it would be done anyway, but that was a large part of where their submissions were coming from for the relocation, was out of their kai gathering areas.
Right.
And ensuring that we're looking at land-based disposal, those sort of things, but easier to say Manawhenua values if we could include it somewhere.
Okay. Yep, Andrew.
With regards to potable water for the North Coast, just for your info, Jim may be aware of this, but the Waikowhati racecourse is no longer a racing venue, and it's in the process of the governing body, the Thoroughbred Association or whatever, are in negotiations with the local Waikowhati club that no longer races horses, as I say. But anyway, there's potentially another 8 hectares of land, residential land, that will become available at some stage in the future. So just awareness of that when the investigations proceed with regards to potable water for the North Coast. I don't need to say any more than that, but it's currently zoned rural land, but it abuts existing residential activity.
All right. Thank you for that.
I'm not a member of the Waikowhati Racing Club either.
All right, so I think we're comfortable with those changes to that table.
May I just clarify one matter? That the wording for that outside the FDS is the word investigate water sources for drinking water for the next 30 to 40 years? You recommend that the council investigate it? Is that
Drinking source.
drinking water sources?
The technical term would be abstraction points.
Sorry. Just to pick up on Hawani's question, there is also some narrative under 612.41 on page 134. So would you be seeking us to make some recommendations around sort of consequential changes that to reflect the changes you've done to the table, but also that could be a place that if you want to pick up on the matter raised by Commissioner Langsbury, you could put some text in there, and that could be something you could think about later rather than work out right now.
That was going to be my question, is as we change the tables, we do need to look at the narrative which changes, because, yeah.
I think we're all just going to assume that we would have to determine if there would be some consequential changes to that narrative.
Same in the target as well.
Pick that up as we go through the deliberation sheet.
Yeah, maybe, or what you could do is maybe leave it to, I can have a think about that, maybe talk about that with Anna, and and if there's this further amendments to the narrative as a result of the changes we've agreed to the infrastructure, investigations and provision, they'll be reflected in the draft version of the decision report that you'll each get to look at. And in the covering email that I can highlight those to make sure you focus on them.
Just going back to the wording, isn't it? We're talking about an alternative water source, aren't we?
Yeah.
I guess actually, I don't know what wording we'll pick. It's our main source is coming off the Lammerlaws, and the rainfall on that has been dropping over the years, and you know we have hit minimum flow draws already, and therefore, in terms of climate change adaptation, we have to probably investigate whether or not, in fact, the reserve land we have aside for our water abstraction points is enough, and in fact, when and if there's a change in rainfall, we may need to be looking at other sources. And I imagine to designate a new abstraction point's not a trivial thing. So we need to be looking for. There's definitely going to be a time, in my opinion, in the next 30 years where, if as NIWA has predicted that the East Coast becomes drier, that those water sources will become less able to provide.
I wasn't wanting to debate the principles. All I was suggesting is that I think it's looking for an alternative source of water, like either a groundwater source or a spring water source of some sort. It's just alternative for what currently exists.
Yeah, I just don't want to make it look like we're running out and just looking randomly for new water. What I'm saying, that's the context in the background. The language we use should be fairly generic at this point because we don't want to be directive.
And I don't know that it's alternative. I think it's about building water resilience, so that we're not reliant just on the deep creeks, deep stream. That's where I'm coming from.
And it can include potentially our own efficient use of the water.
Yeah, indeed.
Right?
First.
Yeah. Well, it would do if it's any good.
All right, so that's good, I think. So that brings us to the end of the list of sort of specific headings or topics that I thought we could usefully discuss before diving into the detail. So now shall we dive into some detail? All right, so just bear with me a minute. So the first thing I thought we might usefully turn the pages on is the end of hearing report that we received yesterday, because there are some areas, there's a lot of areas where staff recommended no change. So maybe if we just, and yesterday we went round the panel and we posed questions to the officers. So I guess initially it would be useful to indicate if we disagree with any of the recommendations, whether they be to make amendments or not to make amendments, and then after we've done that, if we come back to any areas that are yet to have decisions made on them, and I think there was in particular some wording changes were sought by one of the submitters regarding, well, there was Dunedin Tracks Network Trust, had a whole lot of detailed amendments that they put forward, and the staff didn't have time to assess those. So there's a number of matters that we can need to come back to, but perhaps if we go around the table first initially and panel members can identify if they have any disagreement with what's in the final right-hand recommendation column at this stage. Andrew?
Forgot the officer's reply, that's what we're focused on.
Yeah, so, sorry, didn't make that clear.
No.
It's the officer's reply, Dunedin Future Development Strategy, officer's reply dated 10 April. So it's not the great big 60-page document, it's the officer's reply that we adjourned yesterday to go away and read and then come back and ask questions on. Yeah, so what we're doing now is we're just going back to that report and any notes you've made regarding the recommendations. The column is headed any revised or further recommendations. It's on the right hand side of the pages of that document, and just indicating at this stage if you have any disagreements with those recommendations, and then we'll go back to some specific rows where we've yet to make some decisions on the detail of where the officers came back on. So Andrew's going to go first. And just, yeah.
I dealt with mine yesterday.
Yeah.
So mine's been dealt with.
Okay, so you're good. Jerry?
The map that's attached as Appendix 3, I think we've already dealt with that with the hub. It's just going to be an ellipse. It's not going to be kind of a defined line on the map, because I mean obviously then everybody kind of hangs on the line.
Yeah.
And I'm just, if I look at number 7, Mary O'Brien, which I did watch that online, where we talk about incentivise where appropriate. I'm just thinking, is that realistic? Are we actually going to do it? And I'm looking across at my colleague Jim. Are we actually, by putting that in, what are we signalling? That's all. I'm speaking out loud my thought. That was.
I think the thing to remember is that the council's actually passed a resolution to adopt universal design in all of its activities. So it's already sitting there deeply in what should be sitting there deeply in our practices. So I don't think this would undermine where we were.
Okay, that's helpful.
And I may come back when we're going through the through here, or somebody else may have some questions about the Kāinga Ora comments. I just need to think some more about that. That's all. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
On the last row, which is 52, it talks about MPS HPL, and that maps need to be completed by October 2025, but there's no change recommended. But also in the same comments it says a timeframe completing draft maps for consultation is not yet being determined. So for me, I'm just a little unsure what they're saying there.
Which is an ORC issue. So we don't have ORC here with us. So.
That's right, maybe it's a... ORC might be able to clarify it.
They did it in the report. Yeah, I see.
My understanding, so HPL was gazetted 2022. There's 3 years. In 3 years, we're required to have the mapping in the RPS and Land and Water Plan. And my understanding, I thought it had started. It obviously hasn't. But we're going to meet the time frame gazetted by the legislation. That's where we're at.
Yeah. My reading of that entry, Hoani, is that there's a drop-dead deadline of October 25. There's a process to go through, and ORC haven't as yet determined when the timing of that process, but they're aware of the drop-dead deadline. I imagine every other council is too.
And that's how I read it, but I was just wondering whether we need to clarify anything in here. If not, I'm generally happy with the rest.
Okay. No, I think that's fine, because that doesn't occasion any amendments to the FDS. It was really just an information item. Jim, anything?
The Saddle Hill Community Board, so number 35. One question was about up bringing forward the Waldronville to Ocean View pathway and putting it in a 1 to 10 time frame. I'm wondering, the answer is basically there's been no planning done, but aren't we here to actually ask the question of why has there been no planning done? So I would actually like that to be changed to 1 to 10.
Okay.
Again, as I think the clarification we've had is that this is not, it's not compelling. We're not forcing them to do it in the 1 to 10, but we are saying that from a planning and strategic view, we'd like to be considered in that time frame.
Okay, that's good. And Kate?
I think taking on the universal design and the accessibility, I think there actually has to be a bit in the transport about that. It wasn't just about housing. And there wasn't just Mary O'Brien, there were a number of submitters on that. And it translates, I think the only action here is, maybe I've misread that, is into the house design stuff, not into what the streetscape. And there are opportunities where there may be a number of houses being developed for accessibility, and it may be through kāinga ora, that we need to be making sure that translates into a transportable place as well, if that makes sense.
So, sorry, just which row of that was it?
So it's partly in number 7.
Yeah.
I think all of those submissions about accessibility, and they've been picked up as house design,
Yeah.
but not the transport part of it. And I think they were, and Chris was really clear about that, is it's not just house design, it's then on the streetscape as well.
Right.
So it just needs a wee tweaking in the transport, I think, to reflect. Yeah. And look, everyone in any house may have someone who finds access difficult. I get that. And you can't do every street. And I was heartened that Janine said that they were rolling out changes as they could. The budget is really tight. But it's just where there may be a substantial number of houses for accessibility, especially on the flat, that we're actually cognizant of it.
All right. So what you're flagging there is the need for us to look at, or the staff to look at and come back to us or me, if there's to make a tweak to whatever transport text is appropriate in the document to also reflect this, this outcome. All right. Santa, that's something. So what we'd like you to do, or I'd like you to do, is in regard to row 7, the Mary O'Brien submission, to consider accessible housing designers encourage and incentivise where appropriate, to look at the FDS text that addresses transport issues in general rather than area by area, and to see if there's any tweaks to that wording that need to be made to reflect this accessibility issue as well for disabled people.
If there's no text that talks about the design of the transport network, is the task to make some text that looks at the design of the transport network specific to this issue? But
Sorry.
or is there a particular? Or have you found some part of the FDS that you think it might fit the best?
I'd say it's probably 4.10. It's actually in accessibility is covered. I mean, you talk about cyclepaths and enhanced connectivity.
Okay.
I think it's
Okay. Yeah.
accessibility.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that, sorry Kate, is it already there or do we need new words?
I think it's not. It doesn't talk about the issue that they're talking about. And the Otapoti, Dunedin's neighbourhoods are attractive and support healthy, connected communities that doesn't have that accessibility.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
where some wording amendments.
I think that would make them feel like
That's
they've been
good.
heard and it's appropriate.
That's good. All right, Sandy, you can look at that and come up, just email me some suggested wording amendments. Yep.
Not trying to be difficult, but it's more than transportation planning and housing. It's also parks and reserves, just to be clear.
Yeah.
It's-
Okay. So Andrew, is there another section that we should ask Anna to look at, or would it go into that 4.10?
I think you can still go under that section.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Thank you. All right, now then, in terms of that report, Yep, sorry, Kate.
So there was one other, and it's Preens, and
Okay, what row are we looking at?
10.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And I'm feeling that I appreciate the big issues, and Jared gave some very good evidence yesterday, but it does seem to be a block on ICR development. We're saying we want a compact city. It's very clearly articulated intensification, and yet we've got a major issue, and it's already discharging badly or acting badly at times. And I'm just, I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm just appreciating that there is a real issue here, and I'm not quite sure that I'm happy with no change in recommendation, but I'm not quite sure what I want, and I think it's worthy of a discussion.
Yep. So
I'm
Jim,
sure there's better heads around here.
So Jim, I think you, this was an issue that you raised during the hearing. So do you have any kind of response to?
I'm trying to find the Centre City Three Waters table. Because it's the main interceptor, I think, is the issue of the timing of the work on that. Central City.
So is that Dunedin main urban area?
86.
86, isn't it?
Yeah, let's have a look.
Yep.
Yes, actually, thank you for reminding that, because I've written on the page here, because I felt that the table, the timing didn't necessarily relate to what Jared said yesterday, because he was saying that the consent for discharge expires the 1st of January 2032, and the point that you were trying to make yesterday, Kate, was, well, surely if their consent's expiring in 32, therefore the planning and things needs to be coming forward so that we're in a situation that when that consent expires, we're already have done the work about then, or So yes, I had forgotten that I'd written that there, because I wrote it on that page instead of on my notes. So yeah, the timing on the table doesn't fit with what he said yesterday about the expiry of the consent.
Nor does it realise the opportunities that we see in ICR for future development if it isn't unlocked, I think.
So we're looking at the bottom part of Table 5 on page 86. So what, if any, amendments do the panel think should be made to that table? And Jim, I'll ask you first, because you...
Just getting Jared's expert reply yesterday up to get the name of the interceptor correct. It's because it's actually not even really sitting there as a line item, and I think it needs to be added.
Okay.
Well, we know that the consent is expiring in less than 10 years, so I think the first thing is obviously 1 to 10 is definitely the longest you'd give it.
Yeah. What would the description
Yeah,
say?
that's what I'm trying to come up with. I think it would be upgrade of the central intercept, the main. That's right, main interceptor. Yeah. In time to be compliant with the current, before renewal of the current consent.
I don't want to give the answer by the upgrade. It's investigating the options for alternatives. Yeah, I mean, the problem is it may be an additional system rather than that one being upgraded.
Yeah, I know, but central interceptor main interceptor is a pretty specific piece of kit.
Yeah.
Doesn't tend to move around once it's been laid in. The bottom line is we're not instructing them what to do, other than we recognise that there's a consent running out in less than 10 years. We recognise that it is causing an infrastructure constraint to a very large area of the northern part of the urban section of the city. Investigate and implement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So be investigation, some words along the lines of, and again, when this decision report comes back to you, we can look at the specifics, but investigation of options and implementation of upgrade to main central interceptor in time to be compliant with the current consent expiry date of 1 January 2032. Some kind of words like that.
And then put at the end of it, and removal of infrastructure and with removal of infrastructure constraints in the area.
Oh, okay.
I think that will possibly have a change in the medium term to the HC, the housing capability as well, which is a positive.
Yeah.
And is consistent with the. I think that has to be put in there somehow, in the wording and the decision. But it will come with some changes needed in the narrative as well.
The technical term is main interceptor sewer.
Okay. Yep.
Sorry, can I just get a clarification? This amendment is to table 5, is that correct? And that because it's of a degree of specificity that isn't in this table at the moment. So
Yep.
you'd like another row that has that, and then
Yep.
the time frame would still be that, I guess, the 1 to 10.
Yeah.
But with a more detailed description of pulling out a component part of what is currently rolled up as into wastewater for these proposed and transitional areas. Is that correct?
Yep.
In that bottom of that table?
Yep.
Okay.
It would be currently captured, but it's fairly generic under new and upgraded pipes.
Yeah.
So it's basically it's a separation of that line and putting another line in that specifically of the pipes we're talking about. This
Yep.
one.
That's where it goes, underneath that one. Yep. Okay, so that'll come back to you to check the words on in due course.
I have to say that, and the idea of the master plan is really helpful here, because I thought this was so generic that if I were a developer or understanding it, it doesn't mean anything to me. I'm sure that that's where a master plan would make that much more helpful. I don't want to add it into here, but yeah, that detail that you might get from doing that would be very helpful.
Just clarify, there is still an FDS implementation plan to be done, so that level of detail would drop into that plan. It's not, to be fair, the level of detail that we have in our FDS is probably more than some, but it's not the intent to have that degree of detail in this strategy. But that would come in that implementation plan, which also is a joint DCC-ORC process, but it doesn't run through that special consultative procedure.
On this, I still have one outstanding matter.
Yep.
In Mr. Oliver's report back to us yesterday, I asked him about the 1 and 2 year storm event that was causing overflow from these sewers into the harbour, and I can't see anything in here about investigation of removal of cross pipes or stormwater from the sewer system.
It's in the wording.
It's not in the table though.
It's part of the general. It's infiltration and inundation rather than stormwater pipes feeding directly into the sewer system, and so it's old pipes that have all got joint leaks, and so I don't know if it's in here, but so Northeast Valley's being done at the moment. The catchment is being done, but the pipe itself, the interceptor pipe, also probably needs work.
Yeah.
It's relevant in here.
Yep.
So, Hawani, if you look at 6.7.3.2, it starts off with inflow and infiltration of stormwater, which
Yep.
is that issue. So it's certainly in the narrative, and I guess it would.
We don't need it in the table though?
No, I think it would be captured within.
It is in there.
It's in the narrative. It's in the narrative on page 85. The specific areas. Yeah.
No, that's fine if we don't feel we need it in the table.
Yeah.
I think it's in the table, we just can't see it, which is a different.
Oh yeah, the generic language is
New and upgraded
the
pipes.
detail. Sounds fine.
Okay. So there's just 2 matters I wanted to discuss with the panel arising out of the end of hearing report. And the first one is row number 12. And you see at the top of row number 12, it's recommended that table 11 is amended to include the following text, and they put the text there in underlining. I was wondering if we want to make a specific reference to the issue that's arisen out of the freight hub, Jim, so you may wish to sit back for that one, is what I'd like to see, because in my mind that was quite a specific issue that came out of the evidence and discussions relating to the freight hub, was the heavy vehicles on Gordon Road. So I'd like to see some words tacked on. So after, and the upgrades required to address them, words along these lines, in particular options to enable heavy vehicles to bypass Gordon Road. So just to make sure it's up there in headlights, I'd like to add those words into that text. Andrew.
Sounds good.
Jerry? Kate?
Yep.
And Hainu?
Yep, I'm back.
Okay, so that's good. Now the next one might take a little bit more time. So it's row number 21. So that's the Dunedin Tracks Network Trust. There were a number of changes that I think in response to my invitation to the submitter to put pen to paper, they did, and they came back with these. The staff says no recommendation is provided, so we need to just turn our mind to each of those and decide whether or not we think those changes should be made. I had a look at that last night, and I thought the two changes in my mind that we might think about making was the first one. So for 6322, end of para 4, add those words, unless funding via community partnerships enables earlier delivery, which seemed to me to be fairly non-controversial. And then the next one was 64.3, page 70, add to the end of para the wording there that's underlined, which was really just identifying some opportunities. And when I looked at the rest of the wording, in my mind, it didn't necessarily add materially much to what we already had there, but that was just my thoughts. So I don't know if, I think this is the one I asked you to think about overnight. You probably haven't had time to do that. But do any panel members have any other views on that detailed wording that came back from the Networks Trust? Okay.
No, and I'm slightly conflicted on some of those things. So just
Ah.
I'm keeping a light touch on the
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm heavily involved in some of them.
Jim?
No, I don't have an issue with these. Yeah.
Okay, Hawana?
It was in relation to stock banks, and I think it was the second one in their list, whether by suggesting to staff that they may look at how it's dealt with in other regions is sufficient to achieve the outcomes that I guess we were given consideration to yesterday.
So you're looking
It
at,
will require some wording change.
so you're looking at that second entry, 633.
633. When renewing and enhancing flood protection, drainage assets considered should be given to potential dual purpose. And if I was to see that included, I wouldn't even include the renewing and enhancing. It should just be about consideration of
Okay.
shared pathways or shared purpose within marginal strips or something that's a little bit more inclusive.
So you'd like to see some words in response to this submitter along the lines of, for flood protection and drainage assets, consideration should be given.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's fine.
Okay, we are. Yep.
When managing, I mean,
Yep.
yeah, it gets more active.
Yep.
Yeah, happy with that.
Okay, and I'm happy with that. Anyone disagree? All right. No, it's okay. I got it, so I don't need you to record that one. Okay.
You quickly did one part of Andrew Symes on number 12, and I was wondering whether we were going to look at table 13 and possibly change the times years for
Do
that.
you want to go back to row 12?
Sorry.
That's okay. So what table was it, sorry?
13 on page 109. And I think he was challenging us to look at the 1 to 3 years for both those projects rather than 1 to 10. But
So So this is section 6.8.5.
Point 6, sorry. This is about the level of service for the silver stream and the Taieri flood protection review. And at the moment it's 1 to 10. I think he was challenging us to do earlier.
Oh, I can't find.
Yeah, but maybe I may have got that wrong. I'm just.
Sorry, no, he was challenging us at least in his verbal submission to go earlier, to have 1 to 3 for both of those items on table 13.
Okay, so table 13. So the issue is, does the time frame need to be shortened? Is that the issue?
Yeah.
Yep.
1 to 3.
To 1 to 3.
Okay.
If it's in the regular consequence of one, there's another.
I would like to see it 1 to 3.
Okay, no, I'm happy with that. Everyone happy with that? Thanks, Kate. So, oh, that's good. So now if we come back to that number 21. So far we're looking at making the changes 6322. Yeah, 6322, 6.3.3 with the change that we just discussed, and then 6.4.3. Any others? All right. So let's move on from that for now, but if you look at that later on and you think that there's any further of those changes would be beneficial, then you can just flick an email to me with a copy to the rest of the panel.
It's recognising the partnership. We have recognised partnerships regularly about Kai Anga Ora, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would be consistent with that, but it's, yeah.
So is that the table 15 entry, Kate, down the bottom there that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, there's a number of times they talk about partnering, yeah.
So you'd like to see those words partner with the Dunedin Networks Trust included?
I think it's helpful. If it's again about that other funding, the non-DCC funding that may become available if things are actually articulated.
Yep.
And I don't think there's anything negative in it by doing it.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Anyone unhappy with that? All right, that's good. So, that's all I had arising from the end of hearing reply report. Other than just one minor matter, row 22. I was happy with the first chunk of changes, the underlined stuff, you know, cycling safety and accessibility improvements, coastal communities connections, and then the underlined wording. But I didn't think we needed to include all of those detailed sections and the funding, because that's quite detailed and it could well change.
Yeah.
So I don't think we need to include that.
Right. Just on that particular point is the time frame component of it, I think is why that was all put in there.
Yeah.
I think it can, maybe instead of saying currently underfunded, it should say independently funded, because it's got money. It just hasn't got our money. And that, because at the moment it looks like it's sitting there with no funding at all, and I think that's not an accurate description of it.
Or do you want to put 2024 to 27 those areas?
I just think it needs the 1 to 10 years, because at the moment in that table 24 it says time frame unconfirmed, and what they're suggesting 1 to 10 years, and what you said yesterday, Jim, when I questioned the timing. I think if we put in their comments in 1 to 10 years, but not, as you say, Rob, the detail, we don't need to put the stage 1 to 7. I think that would just updating that.
I agree, that would be enough to update it and be consistent with what they're delivering.
And
Yep.
it assists them funding.
All right, so that's been fairly busy time, and so the next thing is to dive into the deliberation sheet. So I'm going to suggest we take a short break before we do that. Give a 10 or 15 minute break and come back I didn't have my mic on. Sorry, so now we're going to take a short break for 10 or 15 minutes, having gone through those documents, and have a cup of tea and stretch our legs, and then when we reconvene we'll turn the pages on the FDS deliberation sheet that Anna has prepared and circulated to us. Much. We're going to now resume our deliberations, and at this stage we are looking at the FDS deliberation sheet, which is on screen behind you and also on what's on my little screen. So what I'd suggest we do, the way the table's been structured, if you look at that page that's on screen now, there's a big heading says number 2, submissions on introductory sections, and underneath there's a heading that says table 1, submissions on introduction. And so what I'd like to do is just roll through the tables, table 1, table 2, etc. And rather than going around the panel, if any panel member disagrees with the recommendation in these tables, then just raise a hand and we'll discuss. And if there's no disagreement, we'll just move on to the next table, rather than just going around the panel one by one like that. So are people happy with that approach?
Where did it come? I mean, I know it's here, but where did it come? I wouldn't mind having it on my screen in front of me.
Yeah.
Oh, Lauren.
FDS deliberation sheet.
Thanks.
Yep, so we'll just pause while you get that up on your laptops.
And we're planning to populate that as we go. That's the plan, is it?
No,
No?
All I need to know is if you agree, if you disagree with the recommendation, that's all I need to know.
So, okay, I'll start with number 1 and my comment this morning. And whether it should have is that where you put the New Zealand coastal plan?
So you want to... Sorry, Kate, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. What I thought should be added to this was I think the regulations require us to have looked, I'm sure you have it, the New Zealand NZC.
NZCPS.
Yes. But it's not in there, and I just thought it'd be helpful to add that as well, because I think it's a requirement.
So that's row 1 of table 1, add NZCPS. Yeah, that's fine. Right, anything else on table 1? So I'm going to go at a reasonable clip, so you need to sing out if there's anything. So table 1. So now we scroll down to table 2. Now on that one, the submitter was requested to provide appropriate words, and I don't think they did, because they didn't have any suggested amendments to the recommendations the officers had made on the narrative. So I don't think we can action that one.
Mm-hmm.
Table 3.
So 3.4.6 section.
Yep.
Where we've got Waikowhati and Warrington as in relation to wastewater treatment plants. We've just had the discussion about Seacliff, and we agreed to have a generic comment. The North Coast wastewater schemes, I think, was the outcome of.
So what we'd say is this also includes wastewater treatment plants, particularly
The northern coast.
the north.
The North Coast wastewater scheme. Whatever Jim's your words previously. Before the break, we just want to replicate whatever they were.
Wastewater treatment plants.
I'm just looking at whether or not, because this is very specific. These are the 2 water treatment plants that are low-lying, wastewater treatment plants that are low-lying. So I don't think there's anything wrong with specifically pointing that out.
Right.
And I'm just going to see how it changes that paragraph by looking at.
This is the statement of hapu intent. This is not the part that you were looking at this morning.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense to go there because the preceding sentence, in the preceding paragraph, has been considering any climate change adaptation measures, and one of the issues is the height above sea level. It's not talking about the Northern Water Schemes, it's mana whenua intent section. Yep.
Right.
May have this wrong, and I think this is the right section. Is it the kai tahu values that has, wasn't there an addition in the meaning of kawa, was it? Or was that to go in the glossary? I think that was suggested somewhere. So you've added the word in, but you haven't got the amendment to 3.3, the kai tahu values, but I may have got that wrong. I thought the narrative said that.
Sorry, I didn't follow that.
So in 3.43 on this, we've got the word kawa, Kawa. I think in the narrative in the report, it suggested that that also be given a description in the values, but that hasn't come through.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
How as in way of doing things or way that they
Yeah.
do things. So we-
Yeah. So it's, I'm sorry, I can't put my hand on the report, but I think that's in there.
Also adding the description to 3.3 as a consequential.
It was part of that suggestion, I think, in the report. I can't go and put my finger on it immediately, but so it just hasn't translated into the recommendation.
Okay. No, that's good.
Or was it in the value, Kate, or not in the glossary? Wasn't it for the glossary?
It may be in the glossary or the...
Because it's, well, maybe I might have misread it, but the way that the wording suggested for 3.43, it says Te Kaka and Kao encompass the beliefs, values and practices, and the table 3.3 is the values. So I just thought, I had interpreted that they wanted Kawa in the glossary.
Apologies.
I'm looking at
I
you,
think you're
Hawani.
right.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, thank you. I've gone to the wrong place, but maybe it's in later, sorry. Thank you. I've got a vision of both.
Yeah, I know, I've got
Sorry.
All right, so the issue there is if not already in the glossary, and I can't remember, the term kawa needs to appear in the glossary. Yep, okay. So I've got to know that. Good. Rightio, moving on. Table 4. Anything on table 4? Yep.
We had, oh, sorry, thank you, Jude. 4.3 Southern Heritage Trust, we had wording that was included in the officer's report, pages 25 and 26. So it's just a matter of picking up that wording, that was all.
Yep, so that's in the March 24 report, officer's report,
Yes, correct.
and pages,
25 and 26.
let's look at that.
Next row down, Brandy.
Oh, the new strategic direction.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, good. Yep. Yep, that's in there. Okay, anything else on table 4?
I did have have another one under, this is 4.11, and it was around the critical infrastructure providers ensuring there was some encouragement for them to work collaboratively. They talked about the proliferation of infrastructure, etc., and I was just wondering about encouraging them to ensure that they did work collaboratively together, rather than, if you look at historically, if you take Roslyn for example, there's 3 cell phone towers within about 15 metres, 20 metres I suppose, of each other.
So that's the entry for Spark, Chorus, One New Zealand, etc.
Yes.
Yep.
Encourage sector to work collaboratively.
So you'd like
in
some
developing
additional
new-
wording relating to encouraging them to work collaboratively.
Yep.
Yep.
I have one.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm redoing something I did earlier. In 4.5, I've actually written under CCS another place where we should be putting and street. So we talk about at the last sentence, accessible housing and street design is encouraged, so that there is plentiful. That's the other part that it should have been in. Sorry, apologies, I missed that this morning in the other discussion.
So, sorry, Kate, I've just found it now. Can you just outline that wording change again?
In 4.5,
Yeah.
sorry, thank you. The last paragraph, and this is Ōtepoti Dunedin has a range of quality housing choices that provide a home for everyone. This is that whole thing that house design also has to reflect street design. Accessible housing design is encouraged so that there are plentiful options for people with disabilities in homes that people can stay in as they grow older.
Yeah.
I just thought having housing and street design,
Oh, okay, gotcha.
it emphasises it.
Yep, no, that's good. Got that. Nice. Anything else on table 4? I mean, there's quite a lot in here, but... Now, if I just take you to 4.11 and the Southern Edge Hub Farm Limited entry, throughout this table in blue font, there's the staff have said they're okay with the changes proposed by Bridget Irving, and then they've shown those changes and track changes. So I've looked at those and I'm happy to go with the staff's view on that. So if we can make a general decision that we're happy with the staff's revised recommendations that are in the blue font relating to the freight hub, then we can, everyone happy with that approach? Okay. Right. Last chance, anything else on table 4? Table 5. Maybe I will just flick around, say, table 5, Andrew, anything? Jerry, table 5? Helani, table 5?
No.
Jim? No,
Oh, sorry, I
Can,
said no, but it
can
is.
I ask Jim in relation to policy 2 in Koanga Ora where the and where it's got blue revised recommendation, and it says here in relation to policy 2, the submitted requested simplification of the wording and removal of requirement to vest in DCC. Requirement is that project is acceptable to DCC ORC. Are we happy with that? I'm looking at you because you've got more knowledge than I.
I don't think in the end we got a definitive answer from Three Waters as to whether they were willing to change that policy or not. And I guess
Yeah.
at that point the answer is probably no.
Yeah.
And that would be something for us to consider outside this process before the next FDS, I think, would be.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is a good one to focus on. Jerry thinks that because there's 2 options. So if we look at the first option, so we have the revised recommendation in blue font, right? Then there's officer response in bold, and then there's the next heading is alternative wording. And if you see at the bottom of that wording, they've got an underlining. And in most cases, infrastructure will be required to be vested in DCC as public infrastructure unless otherwise agreed. So I thought those words were quite good. So I'm happy with that first option.
It does allow some wiggle room in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you happy with that first option, Jim?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think so too.
Does that mean that the last paragraph on page 45, which is it F? I'm just checking whether that needs to be. Well,
I see. So what we could do to F is say generally reject. So
Yep.
a number of hearings with David Shepherd since he's retired as a judge, and he said the word generally is very useful.
Well, it probably just keeps it open, but I just want to make sure there's an inconsistency.
She's in the FDS, the draft FDS, page 45, third column, subclause F.
Sorry, the subclause F doesn't relate to the same matter. No, this is talking about when you create new infrastructure that you have to vest it. This is talking about having no infrastructure whatsoever, like or on-site personal infrastructure.
okay.
They're 2 totally different issues.
Sorry. If the infrastructure required for what's on the screen now is wastewater and their response is a detention, then that would be no.
It's not the same as on-site. That's just it's
sorry,
putting
yep,
in
on-site.
With you, sorry.
Yep.
Yep.
Pick that up.
Okay, good clarification. Thanks, Anna. No, that's great. There's a lot of material we've needed to consider.
Yeah, I'm just making sure we're joining the dots.
No, that's good that we do that. Anything else on this table? Okay, table 6. Okay, anything on table 6? Pretty straightforward. Jim, table 6. Hawani? Cherry? Andrew?
Just a question, I'll be interested in Hawani's comments, but when Matt and Edward presented, we had the history from Edward, and then we had comments from Matt that this is about looking forward. And in relation to that, under 6.1,
Yep.
recommendation, if you head down to the second last line, it's got historic failure, and I just wondered whether that wording should be included when it's about looking forward, but I'd be happy to take your view on it, Hawani.
I thought the language used there was quite soft, so was quite happy for it to be in there.
That's like this issue, which is still live, is adopting the spelling of Taiari, and I'm really happy with that, but it mean quite a considerable number of changes. Or are we adopting it here in the context of this is about mana whenua land? Because actually that's a bigger thing, because it has the whole report will give different, including Strath Taiari and stuff like that. So we just be cognizant of what we're doing. I'm really comfortable either way.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Hani, what's your view on that? Should all of the references be to TAIARI throughout the FDS document?
I directly asked that question of mana whenua when they were here presenting, and that was their preference, that it should be spelt correctly, and the ERI at the end of it is a misspelling. So it should be TAIARI throughout the entire document.
Yeah, okay. Yep, good.
Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering who's going to talk to Lynn's at some point.
I think the idea is that you can fight. My understanding, having just asked this question a number of times of iwi, is they can go all the time to ask those things. That actually it's by us showing that leadership and using it that it's much more powerful.
It wasn't my question, actually. My question was that in order for us to be aligned properly, we should be going to Lynn's and saying we believe you got the spelling wrong. It doesn't prohibit us doing the spelling here, but otherwise we're going to be always in this situation, and I just figure maybe the council should take the lead if not.
Well, maybe we can add that to the bullet point.
I think that would be
We're
good to add
asking
to the bullet
council
points.
consider. Bullet point is council to consider approaching Lynn's regarding the spelling of Taiari, so it is TAIARI.
Yep,
Yep,
that'd be
that's
good.
good, Jim. Thank you.
And probably just talking to the point, not necessarily relevant to here, but we do have representation on the geographic board, and we're working on it there.
It'll be a letter, so I don't think it's too much to ask. I think. Well, maybe both councils, because I think it would be both councils.
Yeah, councils to jointly. Yeah, because our decision report is to both councils, so yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, both councils to jointly approach. Or words to that effect. All right, table 7. Andrew, anything on table 7?
I meant to bring this up earlier, and I'm in the last report. We have dropped an area 11 because of a whole lot of submissions, and some of those related to size of slots and slope. But some, and I just want some clarity around here. When we look at the natural hazards, some of the submissions related to landslips or potential things that we don't actually cover off in the natural hazards. And I think the clarity of why we withdrew 11 needs to either say that they weren't because of natural hazards that aren't written up in there, or be quite. Does that make sense to you? I'm not articulating this well. There were a number of reasons why Area 11 was challenged.
Yeah.
And that it could be just that transport we withdrew it from or whatever. But we just need to be, if it's natural hazards, the ones that they submitted on, but they're not actually covered in the natural hazards in the sections. The natural hazards are quite limited that we've referred to, and I'm just raising that because it was referred to in the submissions.
Okay.
I'm not sure that we can fix something, I just want to note it.
Yeah. So in the natural hazards constraints, we got, it says principally, this is 621, flooding and landslides. Sorry.
Sorry, I don't. We talk about earthquakes somewhere in the report, but it doesn't actually talk about those as being, and which was what some other people were relying on that. I'm just,
So, Kate, just to say what you're asking me to do, I think, is in the narrative where we discuss, in our decision report where we discuss removing Area 11, you would like to refer to natural hazards in that discussion, is that right?
I think we need clarity as why we withdrew Area 11.
Yep.
Some submissions suggested it was because of natural hazards. Other areas, if it is about the transport, that's fine. We don't have to refer to it, but we have to be really clear about why we took Area 11. Yeah.
Good, so you can check that when the report comes through to you for looking at. All right. Anything else on table 7? So I was going to whip around table Andrew. I can't remember if I asked you or not. Table 7, Cherry. Table 7, Hawani. Jim?
No.
No. And Kate? Anything else on table 7? All right. Table 8. Go around the other way this time. Kate, anything on table 8? No. Jim? No. Hawani?
No.
Cherry?
I'm just reading the officer's recommendation in relation to 6.2.3 from Transpower, and the comment about the second paragraph in particular is a level of detail that is not required for the FDS. However, there's no strong objection for its inclusion. I mean, it is quite detailed, that second paragraph that's been suggested to be added in. I mean, I'm neutral too, but I just thought we just needed to take a moment and actually consider whether we were all happy to add that, quite detailed, generally 12 metres from the centre line, blah, 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 all of that. That's I'm just reflecting on.
No, that's good. So
do we want that detail?
you jumped ahead of table there, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry, have I? Oh, I have too, sorry.
But that's all right. No, anything on table 8?
No, I didn't have anything on table 8, because that's why I moved on to table 9, sorry.
The top, or the first item there, it just has, it refers to Dunedin's environment as many areas, blah, blah, blah. It refers to 5 broad categories. My calculation is only 4 there, but minor.
No, that's a good point. Because one was crossed out. Oh, you got a good eye for detail. All right, so now we'll go to table 9. No, you're all right. Andrew, anything on table 9? Yeah.
So this is on page 20, and this is the additional wording from... Oh, sorry. This is page 20. Yeah, the additional wording around the whole Transpower submission.
Yeah.
And we were essentially asked whether we require the 2 full statements, where there was the comment from staff was around the second statement, which starts the 3 primary reasons, etc., was in quite a bit more detail than what was probably preferred for the FDS. So in other words, I think we need to make a call. My view would be that just the first underlined section, starting off a significant resource management issue, etc., would be sufficient.
Yep. Terry, I think you were going to be of the same view, Arnie?
Yeah, no, I was of the same view. It was one that I'd flagged, and as long as we capture the intent with regard to protection of the national grid buffer area.
Yep. Jim?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
And Kate?
Yeah, I'm just, sorry, I've got a note here, I'm just checking the book that I read and I'm
So, yeah, I'm happy with omitting that second underlined paragraph. There's a little bit of it's a little bit out of context with the rest of the document in terms of the level of detail, so happy with that.
In 6.2.3, in the revised recommendation where they've added INVMA, which is what the submitter had asked for, it's in the blue, I just quickly looked through. I had a feeling they wanted it somewhere else in the document, and I haven't gone back to the submission yet. Was that the only place that they wanted that in? I could come back and see whether it was or not.
We had a tabled letter from Ag
Yeah.
Research.
That's it. Yeah.
I was temporarily distracted through answering Instagram.
Sorry. 6.2.3 in the addition of INVMA, which was their request. So I'm happy with the revised recommendation to adding that in. But my question was, and I haven't quickly gone back to their submission, was that the only point in the document that they wanted that added in? I had a feeling there was another point, but Brandy thinks you think that's all.
It may have been more than one comment, but it was related to making sure that they were recognized as a major facility.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
All right, so we're happy with, you see underneath the table, the staff have helpfully pulled all of the changes together into that revised 623, so we're all happy with that?
So is that where you said the last paragraph would go?
Yeah, it would, yeah, yeah. Yeah, both there and in the table, yeah. Okay. So table 10, I think we've covered that in timing matter in our discussion we had at the start of the day, in terms of the the first row, the first entry, all section 6 tables as needed. I think we've discussed that. So if we look at the next table 10, anything on the second table 10, Andrew?
No.
No, Jerry?
No, I don't think so, don't.
Hawani?
No.
Jim?
I'm actually just wanting to make sure that it all works within 10 years. So everything we're doing up to that point is planning. I'm just going back to the table to make sure that we're aligned on the table and on the... Yeah, I guess what we're saying here is then we are through this activity we are effectively concentrating on planning work and upgrades of existing infrastructure, and we're not planning on any new infrastructure being built within the next 10-year time frame. It's not quite in line with the ambitions. So it says unlikely to be possible to deliver within a 10-year time frame. I think it needs to be changed to challenging to be delivered in a 10-year time frame. In other words, I acknowledge the difficulty that's posed, but I do think that there needs to be a challenge to make sure that we're moving as fast as we can on this timeline.
Right.
I had thought these were the ones that I was referring to earlier as we updated the tables, that these are the words that will need nuancing since we did that. Yeah.
So staff, just help me here. So the words we're looking at for rows 6, 3, 1, 4, we got the underlined words that the iwi saw, and then the ununderlined words aren't changes to the FDS. That's just staff commentary, isn't it?
That's the LTP recommendation.
Yeah.
So, or impacts.
Yeah. So that wording wouldn't feature in the FDS. That was just staff's advice to us.
Yeah, so I guess, okay, that's the advice, and we've got those other numbers changed in the table. That's probably enough for the council to work with. Thank you.
Yep, that's good. All right, anything else on this table? It's quite a big one. Table 10. Hawani? Jim, anything else on table 10? And Kate, anything else on table 10? Yeah.
6.3.1 Somerset Group Holdings. Down the bottom of the response, in addition, Policy 2 is recommended to be amended to include reference to alternative funding mechanisms. So we've picked up on that.
Yeah, so elsewhere the staff have recommended changes to Policy 2.
Okay, covered.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
6.5 Kaianga Ora in relation to the timeframe for infrastructure upgrades in Mosgiel.
Mhm.
We've left that as it is in the, now I've lost the table. We've left that timing as it is. I mean, they're suggesting to bring it forward, but I think we've left that, haven't we? Because
Yeah, we haven't made a change.
we
to
haven't
that
made a
table.
change to that.
No.
Okay.
Only because T-NEL is there, and it reminds me of the response we got about implementation, I think. Underpinning all of this is stormwater assessments is about permeability of soils, and we need to make sure that there is, as a bullet point somewhere, about compliance on that permeability. Otherwise, the whole system. And it's been raised by a number of submitters. I don't want to do it in here. A bullet point at the end, one of those covering things.
So the bullet point is for the Dunedin City Council to ensure that housing intensification or redevelopment complies with the impermeable area limits in the district plan.
Yep, because it underpins the whole stormwater. If that doesn't work, then yeah.
Yeah, and that's in relation to the submitter. I can't remember who it was who showed us those images.
Yeah, there were a number. T-NEL at 6.31 also talks about it. There's quite a few.
Yep. All right. So shall we move to? We're up to table 11. I think Jerry, table 11.
That wording, 6.3.2.4, is basically the same wording we've already covered off about the hub, so that's fine, yeah.
Yeah.
And happy with the new 6.2.3.4, yeah.
Okay. And Hawani?
No, nothing on that table.
Jim, table 10.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find it. Yeah.
That's right.
It was the ORC's response to providing public transport.
That's the next one.
Was that the next one? Okay, it's next table. Yep, that's why I couldn't find it. Nothing.
Okay, good. Kate, anything?
No.
All right. So now we're on to table 10. Was Kate anything on table? Oh, sorry, table 12.
No, I don't think so.
Jim, you table 12. This is the public transport one.
Yeah, oh hell, I just lost it again straight after I found it. It's 6.3.2.1.
Which submitter was it?
And it's the Mana Whenua submission and Waikawhati Coast Community Board, and it's increased bus services to northern coastal suburbs. And I'm looking at the second paragraph of the ORC response, which says the economics of PT prioritise fares and frequency over existing services, over extending services to rural areas. And I wondered, are we not supposed to be talking about what we believe to be a strategic need, and so therefore the answer of a current policy isn't actually the answer?
Mm-hmm.
Would be my commentary on that. I think we should still identify that there's been a community need requested there, and my experience on that community board is that it is a real need.
So what are you suggesting is a wording change to 6.3.2.1 of the FDS that reflects the community need or desire for?
Yep, and I'm now going to look to the...
Okay.
It's...
For an increase.
It's hard to figure out where to put it in that because it's quite a big... Could go up there, yeah.
6.12?
No, go directly to the north coast and...
612.5.
Yeah, that could go in there.
Okay.
And it is the first paragraph. I think it says when there is no, the bus service does not enter Waitara, Warrington or Karatani, no improvements of public transport service are planned or being considered for this area. I think we need to put after that, however, there is a strong community desire for services to be increased.
Okay.
So we've got services to Karatani, pick up at the store, which I think it's the same, it's obviously 3 days a week, so that exists, so that needs to be changed because there are limited existing services to Karatani.
Yeah. So it needs to be changed to
Okay, so let me catch
what I'm saying is that the OSF's response is there's not going to be any change, and that's been the official response from the council. I think the community still doesn't accept that as the answer, and so there is a strong community desire for improved services.
Yeah, I think we can add that sentence in. So what was your one, Andrew?
Oh, sorry, when I first read this, I spotted that mistake about Karatani not having services, and it's only you've just jogged my memory.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so that's where I was coming from. Okay.
Change that to does not regularly.
Well, no, it's the same as the rest of the case,
Oh, it's 3 a day. Yep.
So it includes Karatani between Muscat and Grass.
Yep.
Yeah, that needs to be taken off.
Okay,
the other ones
so
are not.
what change are we discussing now?
But you know, Warrington's getting a little bit of service now too.
So does it just remove that sentence? The bus service does not enter Waitara, Warrington or Karatani, because what you were saying, Andrew, is that 3 times a week it does.
So we want to lose that sentence? Okay.
And then add the community desire sentence at the end.
Yep. I'll just make a note for myself.
I'm just wondering whether something has to be put in 6.74, which we'll come to, because the section we're on at the moment is 6.3, which is the existing, I think, services, and I think the future ones is in the 6.7 generically, and then, or have I got that wrong?
So I was just typing something there. So can you just...
Well, I
I
think it's going to come up later, is my point. The opportunity is either to put it into 6.7.4 more. Yeah, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
My concern, that's all. Yeah.
It's good. So anything else on this table, table 12? So I've got one right down the very bottom, 6.3.2, trains as part of the PT strategy.
I was happy where it was sitting.
And this recommendation, or the staff response is, the panel may wish to consider whether it wishes to make a stronger commitment around this. And if you turn to the document, which is the officer's responses to the questions that I posed, and it's dated 28 March, it's that one? I don't know. Panel members, so there's this document, so remember I circulated some questions and the staff answered them in writing. So if you've got that document available, on the reference, I think it's on the very second page, in the left-hand column there's a page 58 reference, it's about the 4th line down, and they said if we wanted to do this, they've suggested some wording. So the issue is, do we want to do this? Do we want to add that wording that's in that row? Table 12, last row. Yep, so I'll give you a moment to find that and read it, and then see if we want to make that amendment.
I think it's table 11, because table 12 is recreation.
6.3.2, right, on page...
Yep.
Whatever that page is. There is a council resolution to ask the people at the next LTP consultation, do you want commuter rail restored? And I noticed that it's said in the report staff are considering it. I just would remind staff that it's a council resolution. It could, I mean, I think it could be something as simple as rail should be considered in future planning as a potential use for commuter systems in the future. I mean, we are building the park and ride in Mosgiel next to the railway line for a reason. It is anticipated that it doesn't, it means you doesn't take away the option that you could use rail in the future. So I think it doesn't hurt to mention that rail could be used in the future.
Okay.
I think if we're going to do that, it'd be good to use the words rapid transit in there.
I agree.
So, oh yeah, so that it's not table 12, is it? So it would be, yeah, you're right, table 6 or 11. Which table would be better, Jim? 6 or 11? So table 11's on page 105, and table 6.
Can it not go on both? Because if you look at the heading, table 6 is
Yep.
transport infrastructure improvements required to service existing development capacity and future, and table 11 is transport infrastructure improvements required to service da. So I mean, isn't it effectively?
Okay. So if we put it
Yeah,
in
I
both.
think it needs to go
and
on
Jim,
both.
you had some amended wording. If you look.
I think that you were going to use rapid transport, right?
I think the use of rapid transit, because it's an understood phrase when it comes to whether that's express buses or light rail or commuter trains, it covers the intent.
It has very specific activity, which I think you are right. It's not just public transport. It's about moving people at peak demand and other such things. So anticipated demand on rapid transit should include introduction and the investigation of the potential of rail to service that in the future.
All right. So we'll stick that in table 6 and 7. We'll refer to rapid transit, and again, just you can look at the detail when it comes back to you.
Can I just state the obvious from ORC's perspective? Obviously, staff see their priority and obviously the passenger transport systems that they've currently got contracted to Dunedin.
Yeah.
So I'll just say no more.
Yeah. So that's the entry here on the officer's response was a 10 to 30 year time frame. So you comfortable with that, Andrew? So it's a long-term aspirational thing. All right, thank you for that.
I think I've missed something, and I'm sorry, Squiz has just dropped out for me. And if I stand back and look at section that's 6.32 in total, we spent a lot of this time discussing freight hubs and Kiwi Rail.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm feeling like when I read this transport section, I'm missing something about rail and ports. And I'm just, because, and it just doesn't give the context. We've spent a whole lot of time dealing with something that actually there isn't that context in there about. But I can't get onto Squiz at the moment to see if there's any scope with Kiwi Rail's submission. Just thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't think there is within Kiwi Rail's submission.
No, but you can see where we've got a whole transport section there about, but what is there now, but not either the port, and yet it's dominated this hearing. It's just an interesting observation then.
So maybe we add that to the bullet list of things for the council to consider, is in the next version of the FDS to give more emphasis to rail. Is that?
Well, yeah, just to acknowledge it's there as part of that whole transport system, because it's, yeah, I don't want to reinvent it now. I appreciate that. Thank you. Does it make sense?
Yeah, then we can do that in that
Yeah.
section of things for council to consider going forward. All right, so now I'm looking at back to the big FTS deliberation sheet. It's hard, we've got a lot of documents, so it's quite hard to keep on top of them all. I'm now looking at table 13. Yep.
Just back to table 12.
Yeah, that's
Just
fine.
going back to the freight hub, and I don't want to compromise Jim and what I'm about to say, but Michael Garbutt's advice yesterday was the hub should be identified in its own right. And I look at the track changes. This is 6.3.2.4 on page 26, table 12, and I read that under the new 6.2.3.4, and if I was a layperson or someone beyond the district reading that, that doesn't give me a lot of detail about what we discussed and what we've got an indicative map that relates to the submission we received, or submissions we received. So I'm just trying to say that somewhere in there probably needs to be a clear identification.
Yeah, so there's going to be a whole new section on the freight hub inserted into the FDS. So it would go in there, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the heading.
Yeah. Okay. So right, table 13. Parks and Recreation. I'll just go around the same way. Andrew, anything on table 13? Cherry? Alani? Jim? Kate? Table 13?
No.
That was the easy one. Table 14, flood protection and drainage infrastructure. Andrew? Table 14. No, Cherry?
No, because I think we've picked it up by changing the table later on, the actual table later on. So I think the changes that I would have wanted is more better in the table.
Okay, good. Alani?
No.
Jim? Kate?
No, I'm happy with what we've done.
Excellent. Table 15, telecommunications and energy infrastructure. So, massive, huge amount of text there for the telecommunications folk. We happy with that? Okay. And then also new wording for electrical supply. Are we happy with that? All right. So table 16, green and blue networks. Anything on this, Andrew? No. No, Cherry?
No.
No. Alani?
Yes, 6.4.3 in the table, and it's the difference between the actual spelling of Kaikarai and the phonetic spelling that is used to date, being the correct spelling being Kaikarae, and it's used in several places throughout the document, so it probably applies to the entire document, needs a generic review to spell that correctly, and in the officer's response they've used mana whenua's spelling of it, so
So the correct spelling is K-A-I.
Karae,
So that's correct spelling.
correct,
So that needs to be reflected in the document.
correct, right through it rather than just in 6.4.3.
Okay. So we'll have a section in our decision report which is called, I think it's called errors and corrections, so we'll slot that in there.
Yep, and it probably has the same implications as Taiari, and so it needs to be given that consideration.
So that goes in the bullet point list of things for council to consider going forward. All right, Jim, anything else on that table? No. And Kate?
I had One in my mind, it's two very pedantic issues. One from mountains to the coast, which is often referred to as mountains to the sea, I think, and is actually so well known as a game te reo is going to let me down.
Ki tai?
Yes, and whether that would be a more appropriate way of putting that, but it's semantics really. Coast just, yeah, anyway.
So we're looking at
So that's
6.4.
6.4.2.
from mountains to coast. Would Hawaiian, can't you'd rather see that mountains to the sea?
And preferably with brackets.
Yeah, I think the term that's probably best used to reflect that would be ki ki tai.
So can you spell it out?
K-I-U-T-A, K-I-T-A-I off the top of my head, but as the document goes back out to us, I'll double check that.
So
Ki
K-A-I-U-T-A-I.
ki tai.
All right, good one.
The other one, and I appreciate this is a really general document, so I don't want to get too into the thing. In here, we've often, there's references, and I'm sorry, I can't remember where it was because there's been some changes, about green and blue, these corridors being mainly for life, for flora and fauna and birds. But there's a suggestion that they make good places for people to go. They do until it's a bad thing for people to do. And I just want to make sure that it's not an open slather, that it's going to be a whole lot of walkways and through these areas. Some of them will be really sensitive. And it was that I didn't think that sensitivity had been quite garnered. There is a real push to push walking and cycling tracks into a lot of places because the green areas become that default area to go to. And I just think there has to be that sensitivity in there. And that I just wanted to say it. I'm not quite sure if there's a fix to it, if that makes sense.
So is that a one we might add to the bullet point list, is that when council's considering new public access tracks through these blue-green areas, they have regard to effects on the biodiversity, something like that?
Yeah. There have been some changes which we're pushing for them to be accessible for people, and I just wanted, I'm not up to, I can't see them on here, but I just think that there was just that tweak. So thank you. I'm sorry. It's a low level issue, but it should be there somewhere.
Yep. So we can add that to that list of things for the council to think about. All right. So table 17, I think we can jump over because we did that one right at the start. The greenfield residential areas. New table 18.
Sorry, and maybe this was a better place. I am going to talk about table 17. It's just understanding the reasoning, because
There'll be a heading in our decision report that says greenfield residential areas, and there'll be a reasonable discussion of our capturing our discussion from this morning.
Yep, on those areas. Thank you.
Yeah, not on each area, just on areas in general, greenfield residential areas in general. So for each of those topics that we discussed very first thing, each one of those will have its own heading in our decision report, and then all of this myriad of detail we're looking at now I intend to include in an appendix, but those other big issues will have their own narrative in the body of the report.
Thank you.
Yeah, so sorry, I should have explained that earlier. So table 18, submissions requesting new residential intensification areas. Any comments there? No. No, good. Table 19, submissions on KO long-term development aspirations. Andrew, anything on table 19? Jerry? Hamani?
No.
Jim?
No.
Kate? Nope. Table 20, submissions requesting new greenfield residential growth areas. I think that comes within our discussion that we had first up. So we don't need to go through that table. We did that first thing. So the next thing, skipping right along, so we got stuff on the freight hub. I'm now looking at the heading that says 7623 North Tyree expansion of the Duke Roads industrial area. I think that was covered under our initial discussion on new greenfields business areas, so we've covered that off. So I'm jumping right through to table 21. The Buller Street properties we discussed, that's the Strathallan one. So is there anything else in table 21 apart from the Buller Street properties row? Andrew? Jerry?
No.
Jim? Kate? No. Right, so now we're looking at table 22. So we have some freight hub stuff. Oh, that's all. So anything on table 22? I think. No. Heine? No. Kate, 22. All right. Boxing along, table 23. Three Waters infrastructure in the main urban area.
That would be one, first one.
Yep. So, Andrew, table 23. Jerry?
We would address 6.7.3 in terms of our the size of the area that covers that. We don't need to make, I don't think we need to make any wording changes, I don't think, in relation to infrastructure.
Yeah, I think not, because the constraints are already discussed in that part of the FDS.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. The constraints are already identified.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah. All we're doing is making that ellipse a bit bigger.
Yeah, no,
Yep.
that's I'm fine in that.
Heine?
No.
Jim?
No, I agree, and I think it's captured in the table changes.
Yeah. Kate?
Yes and no. Sorry, I just want... are we confident that there is enough industrial land zoned in the next 10 years? Because that is something we have to turn our minds to. Because if we don't put this in as an earlier project, this is one of the opportunities we've got. And so I thought there were some questions on whether we need more industrial land sooner than it's been provided for.
There's a very small capacity shortfall for industrial land, about 50,000 square metres, about 5 hectares. We discussed that this morning. So the submissions in front of us won't address that short-term demand.
No.
And so all we can do in the FDS is what we've already done, is indicate areas for potential areas for future industrial use.
Yeah, I get that that's what we've done, but the problem is not having the infrastructure that goes with it. And whether that is sufficient for us just to say that's an issue. If we're happy with that, I just thought we should actually articulate that.
Yeah. Jim, I'll look to you. What do you think about that?
This is more the inside properties part, yeah. Well, a chunk of that's already zoned industrial.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been, that part hasn't been fully developed yet. So I figured, yeah.
But that's in the capacity of reading. What we've said is we want new capacity. Sorry. Yeah, I think we've got a... I'm concerned that we've acknowledged there's an issue. We haven't necessarily programmed a solution.
I would agree in one aspect, and that is that the original Kaikoura Valley upgrades were KV1 through KV4, and this would have been about KV3 in terms of the program. And it has stalled, for the want of a better term. It's paused, and it's going again. I wonder if we do want to say 1 to 10 in that frame, just to point out that we really do. This is another major sewer upgrade that has major effects throughout the rest of the city.
So we need to look at table 5 of the FDS. I think that's what the reference there is. So let's find that table and have a look at it.
I think it needs an actual additional line, Jim.
Well, let's just have a look.
I'm sorry. I've done this in the wrong order. Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Table, the submission refers to table 5. Where is table 5?
Page 86, but I'm not sure that this one is it table 5?
Dunedin main urban centre, see that?
It's not that. Page 87.
Page 87. Is it?
Yeah, future business. Yeah.
It's,
I think it needs a specific line to identify this area. I mean, because there's the general
could be this area or the other one. I'm not, so I'm using this one because it's also the the other one is the Fulton Hogan. Yeah, there are two areas it could be. I'm just raising it. I'm not sure what the answer is, sorry.
So, are we looking at adding a new line to table 5 on page 87? Is that what you're suggesting, Chair? And what would it say?
I'm not sure, that's why I'm looking at Jim. I'm just not sure of the specifics that would capture that.
It's funny that now you've pointed it, there's no reference to wastewater for industrial activity. Oh, it is up there, so no, I thought that was a capacity one. Wastewater proposed future business.
Sorry. Should there be just a line at the top one there being and assess the potential, the need for industrial, I don't know, assessment of, because it has to be about opening up the land, doesn't it?
This is kind of like my question yesterday about the main interceptor. This is another one where you've got a major distribution line running the length of Kaikoura Valley heading out towards the Green Island treatment plant.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact it runs right through this zone.
Yeah.
So everything else though is 10 to 30 around it. I mean if you look at the suburbs that are sitting above coming into it, they're on that time frame.
10 to 30.
But I think we do need to put a push back to say the main distribution sewer line in Kaikoura Valley needs to get upgraded now because we can't get the movement out through the Caversham Tunnel out until that line's been upgraded.
Yeah.
Now part of it is to say I&I is affecting that as well, so we've got to do all the suburbs, but I think there's a potential maybe to put a little bit of a direction back in saying that the main Kaikoura Valley interceptor line should be put on a 1 to 10, and then they can take that direction and put it back into their plans.
So are we talking about trade waste investigation for connection to wastewater? In other areas there's some requirement for pre-treatment before trade waste comes into the wastewater system?
It's more that you've got the top end of that sewer catchment is residential, and then it goes through an industrial area and then goes back through residential and industrial out to Green Island. So they're all using the same sewer line. So it's more a case of looking at that sewer line itself and saying, when should you put that into the program?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just realised the other area is in North Taieri that's already got industrial zoning but doesn't have the infrastructure to it as well. I'm just trying to, I don't want to go into any specific site, I just want to know that we...
Dunedin main urban area.
Yeah. But I just remember that there is that other land, a plan change line that hasn't been used yet. The problem, I don't want to necessarily say where the area isn't there.
No, that's the existing North Taieri zoned industrial land would be considered plan enabled land. It wouldn't be considered in this line at all. And if it's plan enabled, its infrastructure is counted as infrastructure ready.
Right. Yeah. Excellent.
So that's
okay. So coming back to page 87 and this table, so we want a new line entry that relates to upgrading the main distribution sewer line and the, how do you spell that, Valley? K...
Kaikarae.
Yep. And then that's a 1 to 10 year time frame, Jim. All right, so
We'll see what happens once they hear that.
So we'll put that in as a line entry, and that'll be in the decision report when it comes along, so you can just double check the wording.
Thank you.
Thank you for the process, for the leniency there. It's hard doing the two processes without jumping on.
No, it is. It's there's a lot of material here. All right, so table 24, transport. Anything on table 24? We obviously have the freight hub recommendations, but we've talked about that.
we need to decide for 6.7.4 there in blue, which one of there's two options there, which one of those options that we prefer.
Yeah. I think it's the first option. We had the submitter just wanting to stress the staging, so I was happy with that first option.
I think the first option, but
Yep. We happy with that? Yep, good.
It's an odd sentence. Kiwi Rail retains sufficient land. Our policy telling them to do something.
Okay. Anything else on that table? Table 24? Table 25, additional infrastructure.
So one of
No, Jerry? Viney, table 25. Jim? Kate, table 25.
so page 91. I think this is where I raise this, but maybe I'm wrong.
So
The third
page
item-
91 of the FDS, is it?
Hmm?
So
Yep.
Okay.
Which is the table 6. Is this where I bring this up? There were a lot of submissions about the bridge, I think. We've got no change. I'm
So-
just checking that that's still the right timeframes.
So,
and that's not sitting in our draft long-term plan. Well, in the
I'm just wondering. I'm wondering if there have been decisions made in the last wee while that needs to be reflected here, and it's. I don't think it's fair to. Yeah, I just need.
well, it's
So-
definitely not 1 to 10
so what, I'm sorry, I'm lost. What are we talking about? Table,
on page 9.
Sorry.
and which row? The waterfront
the
bridge.
third row that talks about the waterfront bridge.
Mhm.
And I know in the provision, well, we obviously had started drafting a 10-year plan, but now we're doing a 9-year plan. It was removed from the DCC's new one. I'm looking across at Jim, and he's
No, it was removed, but it was going to come up in debate if we had got to that point.
I'm just wondering whether the 1 to 10 year, even if we just change the time frame on it, because it hasn't formally been removed because we haven't debated it.
Changing it to, I was more likely to go 1 to 3 actually in that regard. The issue from my perspective, and just what would have come up in the debate, is that for the cycleways to do the urban connection, we've got to get good rail crossings. So whether it's the full-blown architectural bridge or a full-purpose walking cycling bridge, I still think it needs to sit in the 1 to 10, because otherwise we're saying that we're not going to commit to having a grade separated crossing of the railway line for 10 to 30 years.
Sorry to have brought it up, but I did think we just needed to check on that. Sorry.
No, you're right to bring it up because I looked at it last night and thought, oh no, we need to talk about that.
In many respects, we are actually informed by the old LTP where it still sits.
Correct, the old LTP actually is still in existence, so
Waterfront bridge we're leaving as it is, because also I'd need you to identify a submission that would give us scope to change it. If you wanted to change it.
I don't think there's one. There are.
No, that was to bring it forward.
All right, so we'll leave it as it is. Now, there's an entry I'd like to draw your attention to in this table, 6.7.5, Sue Marturin and G. Lowe, and it relates to the Moanarua playing fields. And if you turn again to that document, which was the answers to my questions, and if you look on the left-hand column under the entry for 119, there's some wording there that the staff have recommended if we wished to do this. Do you all see that? new or upgraded recreational facility, DCC, etc. So that would be the wording that would go in if we... I mean, the recommendation was to identify the need for land in the 10 to 30 year time frame. I'm just pointing out there's the specific wording that the staff have come up with is in that document, the answers to my questions. So just checking you're happy with the specific wording, that's all.
So I think there does need to be a wording in here for new sports fields, because that is what's missing. I mean, we talk about playgrounds, open space. I mean, there's a generic recreational facility, but I think a specific sports field line is probably worth adding.
I'm just wondering where we are with the sports fields assessment. Just, that might be, because the issue is, do we need them would be the first question you'd ask,
Yeah.
and there's been changing use over the years. Some sports need more and some sports need less.
So the wording
What table?
recommended is fairly
Generic, yeah.
general, and it's in a 10 to 30 year time frame. So it's in a,
I guess if we're a growing city,
it's a
you would think...
long-term
Yeah,
investigation.
if we're a
proposal.
growing city, you would think in time we would need more sports field. Even if the use is changing, then we might need less hockey but more football or whatever.
Whatever.
I mean,
Oh, I know, I agree, but I think it's probably under that time frame. But
10 to 30.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay, so we're happy with that wording. I just wanted to double check.
Could we include something in there, because we are going to lose some sports fields if we see managed retreat from Moanarua, along the lines of no net loss to recreational areas? Or is that going too far?
I think that might go a little bit too far.
because that's presuming that
It's more that if for some reason we lose everything at Kettle Park, we need to at least have replaced those, not even considering whether we need new ones. That's just how we have that reflected.
I think that, and that's why I'm trying to figure out if there's a table that talks about assessment of use requirements, because I know that Parks and Rec have gone through that activity. I just can't really remember if it finished or not, to be honest. Because it would, that statement would have the assumption that we're right on the edge of not having enough, and I don't know if we've got that answer yet. It's definitely we're going to lose it. There's no doubt about that. That's why I'm kind of thinking just the need for land and new sports fields will address it. If there's not enough, then we'll need to put more, and if there is enough, then we won't need to put more.
Yeah. I think it covers it.
If you want to put something like in the recognition that managed retreat may result in the loss of existing sport fields.
Okay.
I was just going to remind the panel that the South Dunedin isn't dealt with to any degree through this FDS because it's waiting on the South Dunedin Futures Work Program. So the next FDS will incorporate the South Dunedin Futures work and could require a whole range of changes to incorporate that, so that it's acknowledged that that hasn't been done yet.
Yeah. All right, so I'll add those words in.
Yep, please.
And again, you'll see that come through, so you can double check
Yep.
the wording. All right, so now I'm looking at table 26. Anything on table 26, Andrew?
Just tell me it's natural hazards, risks and hazard mitigation. As it says, that's table 27, I've been out of sequence all the way through, I don't know why.
Oh, maybe I'm out of sequence.
So what's the heading?
My heading on table 26, and I'm looking at a Word version of the report that the staff sent me, not a PDF, is table 26, submissions on natural hazards in the Dunedin main urban area. So anything on that one? No? Cherry? No? Heine?
No.
Jim? Kate? All right. So the next table with anything in it is table 27, submissions on growth in Mosgiel. So we have freight hub stuff, so we've dealt with that. Oh, that's all that's there. So that takes us on table 28, submissions on Three Waters infrastructure in Mosgiel. So I'll just go the same way. Andrew, anything on that table 28? The heading is submissions on Three Waters infrastructure in Mosgiel. No. Chair? Alani?
No.
Jim?
Don't think so. I'm just looking for the table, but I don't think so.
Okay. Okay,
I'm fine.
thanks.
You're on 30.
So table 29, submissions on transport infrastructure in Mosgiel. So we have first rows on Freight Hub. Anything else on that table? Andrew? Jerry?
No.
Jim?
Do you mind if we go back to...
Sure, yeah,
because I
absolutely.
just... on page 113 of the draft FDS, we've got table 14, which is the Three Waters for the Outram, Allenton, Middlemarch area.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if the flood risk assessment at Middlemarch should be moved. Oh, is it not on this one? Sorry. Oh, okay, Karen, cat that back. I was at the wrong table. Forget that. Then we're good.
I think, so.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yep.
So you're on table 29 or 39?
I went to the wrong table, yes.
That's right. So table 28, we good with
Yep.
it?
Yep.
Okay. It's quite a big table. So now I'm looking at table 30, submissions on additional infrastructure in Mosgiel.
Can I just understand where that forest is? Sorry, I've got confused with that. I'm happy for that to go on.
Okay. So I'm looking at table 30 and the first row is 6.8.5 and it's the horse trails in the forest. So again, if you look at the answers to my questions,
Yeah. Sorry.
the entry is at 127 in the left-hand column. That's the wording the staff have put forward.
So I had to. A question was also trails generally generically trails, and this one is specifically horse, which is, I understand the need for it and all of that. It's does that limit it to horse?
I think, Kate, the issue has been is that there's been so much focus on the cycle and the walking, and which is the horse riders feel that they're not a good fit. So I mean, I think this was to be primarily for horses.
Yeah, and that's good. I just
Yeah.
Okay, so we're happy with that wording that's in the answers to the pre-circulated questions?
Yeah.
All good? All right, now Jim, table 31, submissions on housing growth in Outram, Ellington and Middlemarch. Maybe that's... Oh, table 31 doesn't have much in it. So anything, Andrew, on table 31? Submissions on housing growth in Outram, etc.? No. Chair?
No.
Alani?
No.
Jim? Kate?
Yes, I think the bullet point for which deals with also the 6.93 is the mana whenua concerns. I think that should be a bullet point for action for the ORC, is to look at the septic tanks in that catchment, especially near the river.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's the next table 32. That's fine.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right.
we
So
said-
we didn't have anything with table 1, I don't think.
No,
Table
sorry,
31.
so
So
that's
table
all right.
32. So just repeat for Anna's benefit, the bullet point you'd like added to that last section in our report would read...
I'm happy with that addition, but I think there is a piece of work for
Yep. So what's the work that you want?
the ORC, suggestion to the ORC that they consider septic tank systems near to the Tairi, and their... No, this is the whole of the Tairi. This is an issue that they've got with discharges generally to that area, into the river.
So,
Look at compliance, is that what they're looking at? Sorry.
They don't do any work on septic tanks discharges. They just presume that they're compliant, and therefore that is to test whether they are, whether there are discharges. That's not a compliance issue. They are. No, they don't have a compliance issue because there aren't any rules.
Isn't that the compliance issue?
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So, to look at the The efficacy of this septic tanks and discharges in the Tairi catchment. No, I don't think we want planning work. It is a science work, whether there is a discharge issue. It's been raised.
So an issue for the ORC to consider outside of the FDS is whether or not existing on-site wastewater effluent disposal systems are having an adverse effect on the receiving environment. Cool. So back to our FDS, table 33. Anything there? No? Jerry, Heine, Jim, Kate? Table 34. Andrew? So this, Jerry, Heine,
No.
Jim, Kate? No. Table 35, natural hazards in Outram, Allington and Middlemarch. Andrew? Jerry? Heine?
No.
Jim?
Didn't actually get anything from the Strathtyre Community Board, so no.
We didn't in the end. No, I think I invited them to. They didn't. Okay. So table 36. Andrew, anything on table 36?
In terms of the issues around the silver stream and the capacity, etc., we've already dealt with that, haven't we?
Yep.
Yep. No, cool. Nothing.
Jerry? Hawani?
No.
Jim? Kate? Table 37, I think Otago Peninsula Infrastructure, we covered that off this morning, so that we've dealt with that one. And also transport on the Otago Peninsula in relation to Kaitahu, we covered that as well. So I'm going to jump us through to table 39. And so at the entry for the row that starts 6.10.6, the track from St Clair along the eastern coast, and the recommendation from the staff is consider adding into the FDS table 20 some text. So if again you go to the answers to my questions, and the entry is under 133, so the left-hand column, 133, and here's some wording that the staff have come up with. So are we happy with that wording? Yep. Good. So now I'm looking at table 40.
Six 11.3 I think we've dealt with, but there's a specific question in there that I presume we've responded to as well, which was around the spelling entirety, so
Yeah.
I think it's dealt with.
Okay, thanks, Helani. Table 41, transport infrastructure on the south coast. Andrew? Jerry?
I think we've picked up that 611.5 in the table. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. Helani?
No.
Jim? Kate? Excellent, thank you. Table 42, additional infrastructure on the south coast. Again, I'll just draw your attention in terms of the entry 611.6 and the pump track. Again, if you go back to the answers to my questions, I think there is some recommendations there.
Yes. 134.
Yeah, the second 134. Yep. So that's the wording staff have come up with. If we're happy with that.
Yeah.
Jerry, happy with
Yeah,
that?
happy.
Everybody?
Yep.
Good. Table 43, submissions of iwi and hapu for the north coast. Andrew? Some recommended wording there from the officers. Jerry?
No.
Alani, you happy with that?
Yeah, no, I'm good with that.
Thanks. Jim? Kate?
I'm going to say it. Bryn's point doesn't sound, I'm just intrigued that we've got all these other wonderful words that we have changed, and I'm just, that one seems to be the name that surprises me most, but I'm just looking for some guidance from...
Guidance would probably come from Puketaraki rather than myself.
Very good.
All right, table 44, Three Waters on the north coast. Andrew? Jerry? Okay, Hawani?
No.
And Jim?
I think we captured it in
We
the
captured it
tables.
this morning, didn't
Yep.
we? Okay, just check if there's anything else in that table. I think we're all good. All right, then let's go to table 45. Did we capture that one already this morning? So anything else, anything further on table 45, anyone? No. So now we're looking at table 46.
Oh, actually, sorry.
Yeah.
There's a 6.12.5. It's from the Community Board about safety on State Highway 1, and it says the panel can seek further advice if wishes to include this project in the FDS. Note this will be a Wakatahi project. It's outside the scope of the FDS, but can we capture it in the
Yep. Yep.
notes for the end?
Yep. Just give Anna some words and she'll write them down.
Quite literally, pedestrian and cyclist safety on State Highway 1 for the north coast. To raise it with Wakatahi. The DCC would raise it with Wakatahi.
Yep. You could even say DCC to raise issue of pedestrian and cycle safety on State Highway 1, whereabouts?
Between Waitati and Warrington, specifically, I think is where
Between
they...
Waitati and Warrington, and to seek a resolution of that issue.
And Waikawati and Karatani.
So it's just a little bit of a more action-orientated action.
Yep, thanks.
It's good. Table 40... Oh, that's just the Transpower one. So table 47. No change recommended. We happy with that? Everybody?
Yep.
Table 48. Iwi Hapu values in the West Harbour, so some wording recommended. We happy with that?
Agree with amendments.
Thanks, Hawani. Table 49, Three Waters on the West Harbour. So the recommendation is to amend table 26 to indicate a time frame of 1 to 10 years. We happy with that?
Yep.
All good? And then, okay, anything else in that table? All good?
Yep.
Table 51, submissions on additional infrastructure in the West Harbour. And again, draw your attention to that first entry, 6.13.6. Staff recommendation, consider adding words into the FDS. And if you look at the answers to my questions, the last entry in the left-hand column, it's 147, and you can see the wording in the far right-hand column, amend table 28 of the FDS, and staff have recommended wording there for us to consider. So if we're happy with that, that's good. Table 52, anyone have issues with table 52? No change recommended. Which brings us to table 53, submissions on technical matters. Reasonably straightforward and technical issues. Andrew, anything on table 53? A lot of this relates to ORC actions. No? Cherry? Hawani?
No.
Jim? Kate? Good. Table 54, submissions on other matters.
I think that's one of our bullet points about for future FDS, something in that about waste
include
management.
some more fulsome discussion in
Yeah.
next FDS. So that could go on the list of bullet points. Include more fulsome discussion of waste management. So just refer to the change requested text, Anna, perhaps, and then develop a bullet point that captures that in terms of what the next fulsome discussion is going to be about.
Mr. Chair, I think this came from the Waikato Coast Community Mall, but I think their intention is citywide.
Okay. So Jim, can you do some words for Anna then?
I think actually the recommendation pretty much covers it, which is include a more fulsome discussion on waste management in the next DFDS.
Easy, just on waste management in general.
Yep.
Okay, good. Table 55, pretty straightforward.
Just on that, it's a global search required throughout the entire document for iwi and replace it with mana whenua where appropriate.
Okay, that's good. I'll make a note of that. All right, so where are we up to? Errors and omissions. So any additions to errors and omissions?
In the, it's just in the introduction in the forward, we talked about Kāinga Ora and Waka Katohi, and there is reference to the Ministry of Education. But I presume the central government departments or agencies were broader than that. It's just that those are the ones involved. Again, it just shows our...
Yeah, which page of the FDS should we look at for that?
This is page 7. So the requirements are to consult central government agencies. We only talk about the feedback from 2 of them, which is and the next paragraph over we talk about Ministry of Education or somewhere, maybe the page over. I just thought it would be, it'd be good to say general central government agencies, including Kāinga Ora and Waka Katohi, to show that we've fulfilled the role.
Oh, I see. So you're in the second column, second to bottom bullet point, feedback from key contributors, Kāinga Ora and Waka Katohi, and you just want to say, and other government agencies?
Sorry, that...
Was that covered somewhere else already?
That would... So the key contributors were identified from the very start of the process as of the agencies that were involved operationally in the production of the document. It's more than sort of your statutory obligations of sending things out. So I think that is actually accurate to what was done.
Sorry, when I looked at and this is just covering ourselves, when I looked at the process, we're meant to talk to central, sorry, you're meant to have talked to central government agencies, and I'm sure you have because you sort of reference it through there, but it's not referenced at the introduction. And the other question I had was about developers being consulted with, and maybe that wasn't needed because of the HCA, but there wasn't a reference in there, and it's not a typo, it's just to give that complete story so that people understand that happened.
You just want to have any additional engagement correctly referenced in this paragraph.
So it's just an extra bullet point, is it, to say something, developers, other government agencies and developers.
Yeah, and just
that
covers
capture
us in the requirements.
Yeah.
Covers your
You've just reminded me, Kate, that when I read this initially in the submission from the Ministry of Education, and they said that there was no need for any additional education facilities, and I think maybe it's a bullet point for when we come to the 3-year review of the FDS, that I would expect the Ministry of Education to be providing a lot more robust data, especially in relation to the Mosgiltari area, because that's where the growth is, and schools are already got an issue with capacity. I'd forgotten about that till you suddenly said the Ministry of Education, and I had a note.
So the bullet point list of things for DCC to consider going forward would have these words: at the next review of the FDS to seek more fulsome input and engagement from the Ministry of Education.
Can we add that to transport as well? Because they're a big player in transport and they never show on that.
But it's the FDS in general.
Yes,
so
FDS, but it's not just on the education and building side.
No.
It's also the bus side.
Yeah, so the words aren't specific to what part of the FDS, it's the whole FDS. Okay, so that's good. We'll do that. And that brings us to the end of that table. So that's good.
Is there anything we've now forgotten?
Well, that's the next thing I was going to ask. So is there anything that we haven't covered in terms of changes that we wish to make to the FDS in response to submissions received that we haven't discovered in our discussion, haven't covered in our discussions this morning? Andrew?
It doesn't relate to changes, but it relates to the mop-up list that we're going to redirect elsewhere. The aggregate inquiring sector submitted and basically concerned about highly productive land classification, etc. And that was the staff response. That sector continues to submit through these sorts of processes, and I would be just keen to be able to send some sort of messaging to try and ensure that we recognise the importance of that resource.
Yep.
And the availability going forward, and it's more of a plan issue, a district plan issue, I suppose, around reverse sensitivity and all that sort of thing. But I suppose their submission was generic and is out of scope for this process. But
Yeah.
I don't want to see it ignored, because
Yeah.
I think it's a very important aspect. I think for every man, woman and child, we use 6 or 7 tonne per year of aggregate to basically maintain what we've got and cater for growth. So it's really, really important.
Yeah, and so in terms of the bullet point for councils to action, would that be in relation to the next review of the FDS, or would it be in relation to their RMA planning responsibilities, or what would it relate to, do you think? Yeah. So the bullet point could be in response to the submission on the FDS lodged by the Quarrying and Aggregate Association to consider the importance of enabling continued access to aggregate resources in RMA planning documents. How's that? Was I going too fast with that? Yeah. All right, anything else anyone wants to add at this stage? Without backtracking?
I have one. It's with regard to the inland port, and it's a staging question for me, is around the heavy traffic bypass. Should be in place before the inland port's given effect to, from my perspective, whether we can do that in the FDS or it's outside the process.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that's right though, because the evidence we had was that stage 1, which would cover at least the first 5 years, would be heavy vehicle neutral for the reasons outlined in the supplementary evidence of Mr. Dines, is that his name? I can't remember his name. So we could make some reference in the narrative to that the stage 1...
Subject to it being net heavy traffic neutral?
And beyond, before it would move beyond stage 2, then that issue would need to actually be addressed on the ground. We could include words along those lines.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy with that. Demonstrable.
Yeah. Right, thanks, Oani. Just writing that down. Cool. Anything else?
It may well have been covered and I've just missed it. It's Graham Lowe's submission about the walkway from Tunnel Beach round, and I'm not. Was it in one of those charts and I've missed it? Because we didn't put it in as an action, did we? Or we did.
We just added it.
Sorry, I missed it.
Right, good. So now that's the end of that. So there's a bit of work for me to do with the staff to prepare our decision document. which I'll be looking to, depending on how quickly the staff can address any matters that they need to address, and I'm not sure what they might be at this stage, but I'll be looking to get that out to you next week. Now, in terms of progressing that, there's two options. I can send the document to you, it'll be in Word format, and then you can individually come back to me with any edits and track changes, and I'll amalgamate them all. And if there's a conflict, like if one of you says edit it this way and another one of you says edit it that way, then we'll come back with a discussion to try and resolve that. Or we could do it sequentially, where it would go first to Andrew, then Cherry, then Hoani, then Jim, and which will take a much longer period of time. So I'd probably favour it just sending to all of you. You read it, you come back to me directly with any edits, and if there's any issues arising, then I'll get back in touch with the panel. Is that all right?
When we reply to you, do we reply all or just to you?
I'll reply all. There's no harm.
So that we can see what the other
Yeah.
suggestions were. So if we spot
Yeah.
something that's very much like ours, we'll be able to alert you.
Exactly. And if whoever the first cab off the rank is, if that panel member has suggested an edit that you already had in mind, then you don't need to duplicate it. So yeah, copy all is good.
Cool.
And I'll keep you updated on time frame, but certainly I want to get the document out to you next week. So, and it's always good to move on. All these things are fresh in our minds, because like I'm sure you're all pretty busy, and I am too, and if we leave it too long, you start to forget some of the nuance and the detail. So that's what I'm intending to do. So unless there's anything else anyone wants to add at this stage.
I just want to say, big thanks to the staff and to you, Rob, because I think it's been a really good process and very efficient. And with the team, we've been able to have all of those comments in the one.
Yeah, it's great.
And the fact that the staff could actually come back to us by yesterday with answers to all our questions, I just think, that was a big ask from us to do it so quickly.
Yeah.
And I think you've achieved this very well and been very efficient in our time, which I appreciate. So no, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just concur with what Cherry's just said and just add in, the feedback from the wider community has been quite broad and really valuable for this process.
Yeah, excellent. All right. And yeah, just repeat also, echo that, my thanks to the staff. Did a tremendous amount of work in a short time frame, and it's greatly assisted our deliberations, so we collectively appreciate that. And if you could pass that on to Patricia at the Regional Council too, Anna, I'd appreciate that. All right, so Hoani, probably just leaves for you to close us off with the karakia.
Thanks for that, Rob, and just passing on my appreciation as well to the staff and to yourself for what could have been a long and lengthy, looking like a month-long process, and knocking it out in a week and a half might be some kind of a record, but I have no idea. I think we've done a good job to date. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atu whai tātou ariki, I hu karaiti me te aroha me te atua, me te whiwhena teitanga, he te wairua tapu, aki, amenei.
Thank you.